Who would give up this path? Everyone who encountered it would fight desperately. Xianxia, who had escaped the city, hovered above the clouds, glaring at the ancient demon with gritted teeth. He muttered under his breath, "Humph. I want to see how Zhou plans to stop this. Senior brother, I think that blood coagulation array is very strange. We should be cautious. If it really becomes too difficult, we should ask Master for help. Opportunities like this are rare in a lifetime. Even if our Master takes most of the benefits, we can still request help from him once we return to the sect. After all, we haven't transcended yet. I would be satisfied if my life level could maintain 1,000-fold." Fu Qing felt that hope was slipping away, but Xianxia didn't think so. Instead, he became unusually resolute. He knew that once his master descended, all the benefits would be gone. By the time they returned to the sect, there would be a group of fellow disciples, and he might not be able to compete with them. The ancient demon's essence blood was extremely important. His master needed it too. Even if it wasn't useful to him, it could be exchanged with other powerful beings for treasures he required. For a transcendent being who had surpassed mortality, their goal was to become an immortal. How could they abandon their future for the sake of a disciple's prospects? Even if he pleaded, it would be useless. Once his master descended, merely rescuing him would clear all debts, and there would be no rewards. Understanding this reality, Xianxia was even more determined not to let his master descend, unless he was on the brink of death. Otherwise, he would never summon his master. If he had the chance to succeed, the essence blood of the two ancient demons and the mysterious power within the blood-red altar would all be his. At that time, he could directly break through, shatter the void, and return to the sect. In just a few years, he could transcend and become a grand existence. With the inheritance of the divine eye and his life level, breaking through to immortal was only a matter of time. This was the prize worth fighting for, not summoning his master to descend on the spot. At this moment, everyone had similar thoughts. The more they knew, the greedier they became. Those who were already severely injured in the divine aspect realm were about to lose their lives due to their greed. The blood coagulation array began to madly absorb the essence blood of the cultivators within the city. This essence blood was only the beginning. The bulk of it was in the blood-red altar. The blood began to gather around Zhou towering soul. With such a massive body, his life level was condensed to 5,000-fold. He was the second greediest person present. The first was the ancient demon. He intended to turn the entire Crimson Eyes realm into his own Tao field, annihilate everyone, and absorb all the essence blood within the blood-red altar. At this moment, he was absorbing the essence blood of all the mortals in the eastern lands. Anyone caught in the light of his gaze had their flesh instantly shattered, turning into essence blood that flowed into the light and eventually returned to the ancient demon. Few cared about what the ancient demon was doing. Everyone had their eyes on the greater treasure. In fact, they thought the ancient demon was right. Once they killed it, they could obtain even more treasures. In Mongshan County City, the consciousness of immortal Zhou appeared in the underwater cave dwelling. Now, only the final step remains. Immortal Zhou stood at the entrance of the cave, not turning back to look at the two figures on the stone bed. Li Miao gently laid down Lady Yi, stepped back, donned his clothes, and walked to the entrance, his voice trembling slightly as he said, "Immortal Master, I've succeeded." This statement was somewhat perplexing, even causing Immortal Zhou to pause in confusion before he understood what Li Miao meant. Upon taking a closer look at Li Miao, he indeed had succeeded. Li Miao had once been an ordinary cultivator in the nascent soul stage, with a very low level of life essence and soul quality. Even his cultivation was merely the result of accumulating the blood essence of mortals. Given his frail foundation, reaching the divine appearance stage was already difficult, and even if he did, shattering the void to ascend was simply impossible. Yet, as their final plan unfolded, Li Miao's ambition became evident. From a mortal emperor, he aspired to walk the path of immortality, a path filled with cruelty. He had to gradually cleanse his mortal form. Without immortal Zhou guidance, how could he have known so much? From his cultivation level to his soul, and now to the point where he had extracted the essence of the Empress, cleansing his mortal body, and acquiring the pure human physique. This physique was of a high life essence, capable of nurturing the soul. In fact, compared to a special life form, it wasn't that special. However, it could be used as a stepping stone. A mortal in the nascent soul stage trying to become a postnatal special life form was impossible. It was like a child learning to walk. It needed to be done step by step. Now, Li Miao could already stand up and walk, and he was walking steadily. So, how far could he be from running? All for the grand endeavor. No need to. Immortal Zhou Chun, feeling gratified as he looked at the current Li Miao, patted his shoulder, wanting to offer some words of comfort, but unsure where to start. Li Miao nodded slightly, understanding Immortal Zhou Chen's meaning. Forcing a smile, he said, "Immortal Master, rest assured. I know what I want, and I'm clear on the path I will walk. Now that I possess the pure physique and have broken through to the peak of the divine appearance stage, the only thing left is the blood condensation array. Once it succeeds and two special physiques are born, it will be time to ascend. Li Miao, you've never disappointed me. Remember, this is just the first step. Our world is vast, and the ancient domain is merely one among the myriad worlds." Immortal Zhou Chun couldn't help but sigh, recalling the days of old, which were dull and devoid of hope. Now, when he looked up, the sky was filled with stars, each one a beacon of hope. Thus, he had the thought of splitting, eventually separating from his original body. Now, having reached this point, he was finally about to succeed. Li Miao also felt gratitude in his heart. From a young prince, he had come this far. No one understood him, he was dethroned, but instead of anger, he felt that the world didn't comprehend him. Only Immortal Zhou Chun understood his heart. That was ambition. The two of them had fulfilled each other. Back then, the consciousness of Immortal Zhou Chun was very weak, accidentally taken from the northern ice fields by the ancestor of the Tang dynasty, and later attached to a toy, eventually discovered by Li Miao, leading to their master-disciple bond. In truth, both of them had risen from the depths of the mundane world, yet they could now ascend to the heavens. If not for the countless mortals they had slain, it could have been a beautiful tale. After their reflections, the two returned to the matter at hand. At this moment, the ancient demon was devouring billions of people from the eastern lands. Once it finished, it would descend upon Mongshan County City. Within the city was a grand array, with Immortal Zhou Chun present. There was naturally nothing to fear, but after years of meticulous planning, they already had a flawless plan. The ancient demon was not a fixed variable, so they naturally didn't bet everything on themselves. They had backup plans. "Let's go to the city wall," Immortal Zhou Chun said, and his consciousness vanished. Li Miao glanced back at the figure on the stone bed, took a deep breath, and walked out of the cave dwelling. In Mongshan City, atop the northern city wall, Zhang Xianxia and the others stood there, staring at the ancient demon, no longer thinking of escape. Their physical bodies had already been absorbed by the blood condensation array. Now only their souls remained. If not for the dispersed death chi array, nothing would have been left of them. At this moment, the soul form gazed at the ancient demon outside the city, and a cold feeling spread through his heart. There's no hope left. Next up is the battle between the Ghost Emperor and the ancient demon. Those two powerful beings from the upper realms are probably just waiting to reap the benefits. How boring! Zhang Xianxia sighed deeply. Miao Renfeng of the barbarian lands tribe couldn't help but mock himself, saying, "Even that is better than us. At least they still have choices, while we secretly fight among ourselves. In the end, we're nothing but cannon fodder. After 1,000 years of cultivation, our power hasn't increased, and neither has our wisdom. Humph, we righteous cultivators." Hua Xuejin began to speak, but the other two turned their heads away, ignoring him. There was nothing to discuss between a divine aspect cultivator and a nascent soul stage cultivator. As the awkward silence lingered, two figures suddenly appeared on the city wall. They appeared right next to the three but didn't pay them any attention, their gaze fixed on the outside of the city. You're the Ghost Emperor?" Hua Xuejian was startled and pointed at Immortal Zhou Chen's consciousness manifestation with a cry of surprise. He then turned his gaze to the other person, who was Li Miao. Many people knew of his identity and immediately recognized him as the Emperor of the Great Tang. To think you're the Emperor of the Great Tang. You've truly brought shame to your ancestors. Zhang Xiansheng and Miao Renfeng immediately started berating Li Miao. But Li Miao didn't bother responding to them. If they had known that the ancient demon had been released by his own ancestor, who knows what they would have thought. Immortal Zhou Chen, however, found the three too noisy, and with a wave of his hand, he sent a shockwave that made their souls tremble, finally silencing them. Staring at the ancient demon, Immortal Zhou Chen asked with some doubt, "Do you think he will make a move?" "I'm 70% sure he will, and the remaining 30% is that he'll come into the city to cause me trouble." Li Miao answered nonchalantly, seemingly relaxed, as if he didn't take that person seriously at all. In his eyes, that person was nothing more than a pawn of his ancestor and also a pawn of his. I calculated multiple scenarios back then, and based on the current progression, there aren't many variables left. If he turns towards Mongshan City, I will make him one of us. Immortal Zhou Chen remained equally calm. Whether it was the ancient demon or those upper realm cultivators, neither were worth his concern. Even if they all came together, it wouldn't matter. If they could watch them all suffer mutual defeat, it would give them enough time to first transform into a special life form, which would be even better. So at this moment, neither of them entertained the thought of losing. They were only guessing how they would win. Outside the city, no one dared to fight. Everyone watched as the ancient demon wreaked havoc. They didn't even have the courage to resist before their deaths. They just stood and watched. At this moment, they finally understood what it meant to be at the mercy of others, like fish on the chopping block. Outside the fortress, such insignificant demons, and they've scared you all to this extent? Are you so afraid of death that you won't even make a final stand? Xiangyang looked at the group of immortal slayers with disdain. The powerful members of the immortal slayers, after having slain the foreign races, had gathered here. Now, as they watched the ancient demon wreak havoc, not a single one of them dared to speak or step forward. Facing Xiangyang's words, few dared to argue, but there were always those unafraid of death. Chang Feng was the first to step forward, saying, "Great Commander, the ancient demon has descended, and this world is doomed. Instead of waiting for death, we should fight with everything we have. Even if there's no chance of winning, we won't disgrace the strong warriors of the Tang dynasty." "I agree. Since no one else can hold the line, we should step up ourselves." Yang Xiao also took a step forward. Though he was only a golden core stage cultivator, he was full of passion. Even the Chenzu Saintess and Jiang Shang stood up at that moment. Yet they all waited for Wei Zhouxian to speak. Wei Zhouxian was the strongest among them. As long as he led, everyone was willing to die together. After all, death was inevitable. Since ancient times, who hasn't died? Leaving an immortal mark on the path to the heavens was the true legacy. The heavenly path was ruthless, but some could defy it, shattering the great heaven's way. Enough! Wei Zhouxian removed his cloak and casually tossed it aside. His expression remained impassive as he spoke calmly. "The divine phase cultivators of the Tang dynasty haven't all perished yet. If someone must hold the line, it should be me. But I don't know if I can hold it. If I can't, then you all may do as you please." After he spoke, an aura burst skyward. Without waiting for anyone to respond, his body shot forward, heading straight for the ancient demon. At that moment, the commander of the immortal slaying guards, who protected the imperial city, made his move. On the city wall, Li Miao saw this scene and slightly moved his lips. This was in line with the plan he had arranged and benefited them the most. Yet, for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to feel any joy. Immortal Zhou Chen's consciousness wasn't there. He was busy integrating the first body refined from the blood-condensing array. This body, 100 zhang tall, had a life level 5,000 times higher. Now, it had condensed to 3,000 times, and it would take only a stick of incense's time to reach the perfect 5,000 times. A life level of 5,000 times was still slightly less than 5,000 times divine power, but it was close. Once merged, it would be at the peak of the Great Ascension stage, and after breaking through the void and ascending, becoming immortal would be as simple as drinking water. Coupled with a human soul level 500 times stronger, his comprehension and physical body would reach perfection in the ancient domain. Back then, the most powerful ancient demon nurtured by the ancient domain only barely reached a life level of 5,000 times. Now, Zhuchun would reach that level. Feeling the aura soaring from outside the city, he suddenly looked over, his heart sinking as he sensed something big was happening, and this event might backfire. But now, with only a little time left to condense the perfect body, he had to stay calm. He also sent a voice transmission to Li Miao, telling him to be extremely cautious about the situation outside the city. Wei Jiuxian was not simple. Neither was Jian Wushuang, who was deep within the blood-colored altar. However, he had long discovered the oddity within Wei Jiuxian's body but had said nothing. Now that it was revealed, even Zhou Chen's true self was astonished. That aura is the third accumulation. This person has received the perfect inheritance of the third sequence, Zhou Chen's true self exclaimed. Although Jian Wushuang had not yet explored that inheritance, he could sense that the aura bore a slight resemblance to the previous Lord of Divine Fire. But that was enough. The third sequence inheritance, and it was a perfect inheritance, meant that all secret arts within had been comprehended to the extreme. Even in the divine phase, burning divine power could unleash power over 1,000 times. Moreover, within his body there was a seed. This was a seed of life, a rare treasure indeed. If taken out, even an immortal would fight for it, as this seed had the potential to become a Tao Lord. As the perfect inheritor of the third sequence and with this seed of life, Wei Jiuxian would surpass a Tao Lord given time. He was also very young, having lived for less than 100 years, yet he had perfected the secret arts of the third sequence. He could fully comprehend the divine secret arts of the other sequences. Combining the two sequences was entirely possible. Once achieved, even becoming an emperor would no longer be a mere fantasy. The greatest advantage of the divine secret technique was its universality. It was applicable to all cultivators. In each sequence, one could find the secret technique that suited them best. Finally, there was the burning. This extremely life-consuming secret technique could be entirely offset for a cultivator possessing a life seed. Therefore, this battle was worth watching. That ancient demon might not necessarily be a match for Wei Jiuxian. Moreover, judging by Wei Jiuxian's appearance, he seemed quite composed. In the sky, one figure, towering 100 zhang tall, with 9 heads, 8 arms, and 4 legs, seemed like a demon descending upon the world. It was one of the 108 ancient demons, a special life form unique to the ancient realm. At its peak, its life level could reach 5,000 times that of a human. However, at this moment it had only reached less than 2,000-fold. Though in a weakened state, it still posed an insurmountable chasm for the human race. Fortunately, there was the divine secret technique. Standing on the other side, Wei Jiuxian, with the faintest glimmer of light, burst forth with a brilliance that overshadowed the sun. The legendary ancient demon. This is the Tang Empire of the Eastern lands. The one who will slay you is named Wei Jiuxian. Remember that. As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Jiuxian's divine power ignited once more, and the area behind him was engulfed in a sea of divine power. The 9-headed ancient demon let out a cold, eerie laugh, its enormous eyes rotating, causing the heavens and the earth to resonate with a low rumble. Mere mortal, dare you slay a god? Buzz! The demon's eyes trembled, and a scarlet beam of light instantly erupted. Wei Jiuxian remained where he was, not even attempting to dodge. With a roar, he crossed his arms, and merely by force of will, shattered the scarlet beam. Then he unleashed a punch, his body leaning back slightly. This punch seemed to embody the very beginning of the world. A deafening explosion instantly swept across the entire Tang Empire of the Eastern lands. The shadows of fists intertwined, and no one knew how many punches were thrown in that brief moment. But from the ancient demon's body, countless bloody holes could be seen blooming with blood. Such intense combat made everyone tremble with fear. Outside the ancient castle. This is the legendary divine eye secret technique? It feels even more powerful than the secret techniques I've been cultivating. Xianxia was shocked, frozen in place. At that moment, he wasn't sure if entering this world was a blessing or a curse. But after witnessing such a powerful divine eye secret technique, which elevated a mere mortal to such heights, he made a firm decision. He had to learn it, and he had to learn the best divine eye inheritance. With this secret technique, even a mortal body could rival a special life form. If one possessed a special life form's body as well, it would be an absolute kill. This was why Li Miao and Immortal Zhou spared no expense. Even the two upper realm cultivators who were present couldn't help but gasp. An indigenous person from a mundane world had surpassed them. If they had been involved in that intense battle just now, they might have perished. It's the divine eye inheritance from the third sequence. He actually cultivated it to perfection, but I'm not sure which kind it is from the third sequence. If my second sequence inheritance could be cultivated to this level, it would definitely be stronger than his. Xianxia was somewhat indignant. Among the mortals, he admired the old ancestor of the great Tang dynasty the most. That person was a true prodigy. But now another emerged, Wei Zhouxian. No matter which one, in the upper realm, they would all exist as Dao children. At this moment, each of them surpassed him, and even his pride in the second sequence inheritance only brought him to the domain level far from perfection. The only advantage he had was in the foundation, as the second sequence was purer than the third sequence, and the burning power was more violent. On the city wall, Li Miao watched this scene, feeling equally shaken inside. He had constantly thought that Wei Zhouxian would be defeated, but he never expected Wei Zhouxian to suppress the ancient demon. His strength far surpassed that of the ancient demon. Such powerful strength was much greater than his own. Even if he condensed the flesh of a special life form, he might not be a match for Wei Zhouxian. Because what Wei Zhouxian burned was power that surpassed ordinary people by thousands of times. The multiplier of the life level was just the foundation. For example, if your body's level was tenfold, a punch would be 10 times the strength of an ordinary person. But if the power burned was tenfold, a punch would not just be 10 times stronger because there would be the addition of secret techniques, possibly 30 or 50 times stronger. So now, although Wei Zhouxian's life level was low, his strength was immense. With thousands of times the power, a punch could collapse a vast space. Ascending to a higher realm was merely a thought away. Yet he chose to stay and kill the ancient demon. Yes. Not just to severely wound, not just to repel, but to kill. Each of his moves was made with full effort. Though he could suppress the ancient demon, killing it was extremely difficult, requiring him to burn more power to sustain the battle. But this power came from the mortal world, not divine power. If it were divine power, he could easily kill the ancient demon. This was something Jian Wushuang understood most clearly. The division of power systems had many paths, such as the void universe and the divine power universe. They followed different paths. There were different roads between powers, but the path of divine power was not wrong and was also mainstream. The number of cultivators in other power systems was small for this reason. Like now, the ordinary power used by the Chimu realm was not much different from that of the upper realm. The difference lay in the power of immortality versus the power of mortals. Mortal power was limited and would eventually be exhausted. For example, now in the Chimu realm, the power was limited. If they continued burning, the entire world might not be able to sustain it. Fortunately, the ancient demon broke through the 9 heavens, allowing this world's power to be enhanced. In this regard, Wei Zhouxian truly had to thank the ancient demon. As a cultivator with mortals in his heart, Wei Zhouxian deliberately waited for the opponent to break the 9 heavens before choosing to strike. Immortal power, on the other hand, was different. Immortal power was the power of Xianxia. What was immortality? It was the immortality of the Tao. So after becoming a Xianxia, the power burned and used came from the power of the Tao. This power would almost never extinguish. The period when the divine eye secret technique exploded was this time when immortal power continuously burned, making the Xianxia of the upper realm extremely formidable. Once they fought, they could even destroy an ancient domain. The 36 ancient domains shattered back then because of the participation of Xianxia in the battle. The strength of immortal power corresponded to that of heaven-defying power. Further up was divine power. This power originated from the universe. Universe divine power. Divine power was the pinnacle of power, extending to the universe God, which is why it was called divine power. Further up were the powers of time and space and starry sky power. These powers, when used at a weaker stage, were slightly challenging unless one was like Jian Wushuang, then it didn't count. However, even when Jian Wushuang used it, it was because of the effects of the primordial transformation. He never compared divine power to time and space power, but the difference was extreme. When reaching the starry sky, the conversion of power might have to switch to time and space power or starry sky power. Back to Wei Zhouxian, who had burned mortal power to its peak, tearing apart the ancient demon's head with his bare hands, leaving the ancient demon powerless to fight back. The ancient demon, who had been suppressed all this time, began to erupt with fury, determined to reverse the situation. At the very least, he wanted to even the odds. He roared in defiance, his 8 arms wielding his innate divine abilities, continuously blocking the oncoming barrage of fists. Fortunately, his physical body was strong enough that even when his head was shattered, it could still regenerate. Although Wei Zhouxian's body was small, he used the God image technique, known as Law of Heaven and Earth, to enlarge his form to 100 zhang, making him almost equal in size to the ancient demon. Damn human! I will tear you limb from limb! The ancient demon roared, bellowing, 8-armed spacelock, suppress! With those words, the surroundings trembled as a formidable law and power descended upon Wei Zhouxian's head. The sensation was agonizing, causing Wei Zhouxian to weaken by a level, and the speed of his fist shadows slowed down. Seizing this opportunity, the ancient demon roared once more, kill! As soon as the word kill was uttered, countless shadows of ancient demons surged towards Wei Zhouxian. The earlier command to suppress had a unique domain quality, allowing it to restrain opponents. But now the command to kill was a deadly force. A brutal slaughter ensued, closing in swiftly. Wei Zhouxian abandoned his fist attacks and instead focused on defending against the oncoming shadows of the ancient demon. Shocking heaven spear! With a wave of his massive hand, a long spear descended from the heavens. The moment the power of the divine spear made contact, a dragon's roar from the firmament instantly shattered the suppression domain. The spear swept across, obliterating the shadows of the ancient demons. How is this possible? He actually broke through my suppression and killing divine ability just like that. The enormous eyes of the ancient demon were filled with astonishment. This was his innate divine ability, a method strong enough to challenge opponents beyond his level, yet he couldn't defeat a human cultivator of the same level. For a special life form, this was a tremendous humiliation. Suppression and killing domain. The 9-headed ancient demon roared furiously, and his 8 arms exerted simultaneous force. A destructive power surged from the heavens and earth. He forcefully expanded his domain to cover the entire eastern land of the Tang dynasty. This was his strongest attack. At the same time, he summoned the 3rd sequence inheritance hall, intending to use it to suppress Wei Zhouxian. No matter what, he couldn't afford to lose to a human cultivator. After being suppressed for so many years, only to encounter such a formidable opponent upon his release, his anger had reached its peak. The domain descended. Everyone trembled. The billions of people in the Tang dynasty all knelt at that moment. Only a few cultivators struggled to stand. Even Immortal Zhou Chun and Li Miao, who were within Mongshan County City, had complicated feelings. Is this a naturally born special life form? Li Miao was deeply shocked. He had seen so little, only receiving a vague introduction from his immortal master. He lacked a sense of reverence for true powerhouses. At this moment, he finally understood the vast difference in the essence of life. The 9-headed demon had elevated its life level by a full 2,000 times. Although it was far from its peak condition, This disparity was enough to make mortals submit and cause cultivators to bow their heads. It won't be long before you become as powerful as he is, perhaps even stronger. Li Miao was stunned and turned to look at Immortal Zhou Chun within the blood condensation array, nodding excitedly. He too would become that powerful. The thought made him suppress his excitement. Outside the city, the four-god manifestation realm peak experts, though experienced, were also somewhat unsettled. One of the two Arhats, the Destruction Arhat, trembled with his lips, speaking in an unwilling tone. They say the heavens are fair, but how can cultivators compensate for such a disparity? Without the secret technique of the divine eye, the human race would likely be suppressed forever. Boundless! The extinguishing Arhat clasped his hands together and made no further comment. Xianxia, hearing their conversation, couldn't help but sneer. What do you know? The greatest trait of the human race is their comprehension ability. Though the collective might not match special life forms, their top-tier combat strength is not weaker than these ancient demons. Who do you think killed those ancient demons? When they ascend, they will understand. In the ancient domain, humans are supreme. No matter how powerful special life forms may be, they cannot overshadow the heavens. Fu Qing held his divine sword, appearing cold and detached. Though ancient demons were strong and possessed innate divine abilities, they started at such a high level that they lost the ability to innovate. Because they could not reproduce, they lived flamboyantly or established forces to dominate one region. Without the desire to advance further, they would be surpassed by others. For billions of years, ancient demons were born at the pinnacle of the Great Completion, but when they fell, they were still only at the peak of the Great Completion. They even disdained using treasures and refused to cultivate secret techniques created by the human race or invent their own. They could be said to lack the will to progress. Moreover, their breakthroughs were thousands of times harder than those of humans, making them more likely to abandon the path of cultivation. Today's outcome was inevitable. Calling them the most perfect life forms was not an exaggeration, but they were not perfect powerhouses. True powerhouses possess a heart that constantly seeks progress. Every human cultivator present had such a heart. No matter how difficult and perilous the road ahead, they would forge ahead. For example, Li Miao and Immortal Zhou Chun. One was a human emperor, the other a spiritual entity, yet they had spent decades planning, culminating in today's imminent peak. This was determination and confidence. Stripped of their titles, they were merely a mortal and a well-informed spiritual entity. Yet they both had the heart of a powerhouse, constantly striving forward. Even two powerful experts from the upper realm, both at the peak of the primordial spirit, willingly descended into the mortal world, enduring a millennium of hardship, all for the sake of a heritage temple and the elusive legends of ancient demons. They had not given up even now. It was also a heart that continually sought progress. On a grander scale, Jian Wushuang was no different. He kept advancing. After falling from universe god to mortal, he still climbed back step by step. He struggled among mortals, steadily returning to the peak. This process, though seemingly wretched, was nothing. When he reached the summit again, looking back, he would realize that those moments of bowing his head, retreating, and enduring grievances were mere fleeting hardships, easily brushed aside. They would not affect his status as a supreme powerhouse. Being able to pick up and let go, endure and chase. This was the cultivator's heart of progress. Everyone had their own perspective, but this was Jian Wushuang's view. Just like everyone present who, upon witnessing the power of the ancient demons, felt a pang of bitterness in their hearts. In contrast, Wei Zhouxian, who truly faced the ancient demons, remained calm. He felt no awe for the innate perfection of the ancient demons. Instead, he harbored a sense of pity. Suspended in midair, Wei Zhouxian gently raised one hand, his expression stern as he shouted angrily, "Citizens of the Great Tang, from this day forward, do not kneel to the strong. Moreover, he is nothing more than a flawed being, without parents, family, or brothers. He is not worthy of your submission." With that, he raised his long spear and charged directly at the ancient demon. At this moment, his battle intent soared to its peak. With this spear, I will bring peace. The long spear, like a dragon's roar, emitted a melodious sound, stirring the dragon spirit within the hearts of billions of mortals. Everyone as a dragon. Kill! At that moment, all the mortals in the world roared out this single word. Wei Juxian charged toward the ancient demon. Billions of mortals rose up against the powerful beings that had oppressed them. In that moment, the hearts of the masses united as one. He, Wei Juxian, was the ruler of this world. His body transformed into the red-eyed realm's manifestation of the heavenly Tao, displaying a truly invincible stance. At that moment, it wasn't the secret art of the divine eye, nor the life seed within him that he relied on. It was the collective breath of all the people in the world, propelling him toward the ancient demon. Even the ancient demon with its 9 heads trembled in its heart. Facing this unstoppable spear, its domain shattered in an instant. Despite using its 8 arms to unleash divine powers to block the attack, they were swiftly torn apart. No! With an unwilling roar, the ancient demon bellowed. Even in the ancient times, it had never faced death, but now it was about to fall at the hands of a mere mortal, a native of the red-eyed realm. The unwillingness and humiliation caused its massive eyes to explode. In those eyes, the last image it saw was the spear charged with the power of a dragon heading toward it. In the next moment, the heavens and earth collapsed. The enormous eyes of the ancient demon shattered completely. At that very moment, its life force crumbled. Its body disintegrated, and the blood of the ancient demon dyed the earth red. In the sky, with its domain gone, the third sequence's hall of inheritance also fell to the ground. Only Wei Juxian remained standing in midair, gripping his long spear like a peerless warrior guarding the gate of heaven. The ancient demon's blood boiled, dancing on the tip of his spear, but in the end, it unwillingly slid down the shaft, falling onto the mortal land below. The ancient demon was slain. He had done it. The entire sky was illuminated by Wei Juxian's figure. My name is Wei Juxian, a mere mortal of the red-eyed realm. Today, I declare that there shall be no more cultivators, no more powerful beings under this sky. He swept through the world. It wasn't just empty talk, he had truly done it. Standing on the city walls, Li Miao gazed at Wei Juxian in shock. His heart surged with emotion, yet was filled with disappointment. He had hoped to witness Wei Juxian being slain by the ancient demon so that he could step forward and be the savior. Then, he would have looked down at Wei Juxian's corpse and said, "You were wrong. This world needed powerful beings to suppress it. Only then could it be a paradise." But today, Wei Juxian, with the body of a mortal, had slain the ancient demon. It was a hard slap to Li Miao's face. He felt jealousy, resentment, but he also acknowledged it. Wei Juxian had said it, and he had done it. At that moment, he forgot to look behind him at the blood condensation formation. Immortal Zhou Chun had successfully forged a body with a life force 5,000 times stronger, and his spiritual form possessed a soul level 500 times more powerful. The two had fully merged into one. It worked. Only Zhou Chun paid no attention to Wei Juxian outside. He was basking in the joy of success. His towering human figure, 100 feet tall, instantly shrank to normal size, and he donned a black robe, flying straight toward the city walls. Immortal Master! Li Miao saw Zhou Chun approaching, but he wasn't particularly excited, only responding faintly. Immortal Zhou Chun looked at the hovering Wei Juxian, then glanced at Li Miao and said, "Are you feeling that Wei Juxian might be the savior, stealing your spotlight?" Yes, Li Miao was honest, with no need to hide it. While others marveled at Wei Juxian's strength, he was jealous of his actions. "Haha, your mortal heart has not yet been extinguished." Immortal Zhou Chun chuckled softly. He was in a good mood because his success had finally come. With his life force magnified 5,000 times, though he hadn't mastered the divine eye technique, his sheer physical and spiritual strength could easily crush everyone present, so he remained so composed. Upon noticing that Li Miao was feeling down, he offered some comfort, saying, "Showing off in front of mortals isn't something to be proud of. Once you ascend to the higher realms, you'll have everything you desire. There's no need to compete with mortals. Understand?" "I understand." Li Miao, regaining his composure, nodded firmly. Now that immortal Zhou Chun had succeeded, and the ancient demon outside had fallen, all that remained was to retrieve the essence blood. With that, a second physical body could be formed. However, his soul was still lacking, so he needed to perform the death array again to condense the Ghost Emperor. That could be accomplished using the souls of those cultivators. In his mind, everything was already within reach. I'll head out and deal with that boy. You stay inside the city and wait. After speaking, Zhou Chun took a step forward, walking through the air toward Wei Zhouxian. Seeing how powerful Wei Zhouxian was, both Xianxia and Fu Qing realized that this was their chance. Wei Zhouxian didn't care about the ancient demon's corpse, but they did. The two arhats, whose mission had been to protect the mortal realm, had completed their task. Both bowed their heads, reciting their mantras in silence, and with the resolution of karma, they ascended in broad daylight. In the past, the combined ascension of two arhats would have been a grand event in the cultivation world. But at that moment, it was overshadowed by Wei Zhouxian's presence. So not many people paid attention. However, on the city wall, Zhang Xiansheng and others trembled with jealousy. Watching others ascend while their own souls were about to be refined filled their hearts with immense resentment. Why wasn't that them? Had they known this outcome, they would likely have chosen to align with the old ancestor of the Tang dynasty. But now it was too late. All they could do was stand there and watch. Meanwhile, their focus shifted to the gathering forces outside the city. 3 factions, 4 individuals. They still had hope. If Zhou Chun and Li Miao failed, they could potentially reconstruct their physical bodies. An intact ancient demon body was of immeasurable value. If the ancient demon released all its power, it could reignite the glory of the red-eyed realm from ancient times. Moreover, the essence blood, skin, and bones could be used to craft a body that would multiply their strength 1,000-fold. They didn't need a large body. A human-sized one would suffice. It wasn't mere wishful thinking. This was a real possibility. In midair, Wei Zhouxian gazed coldly at the 3 people. Privately, Xianxia communicated with him, proposing a partnership. He also sent a similar message to Zhou Chun. But Zhou Chun completely ignored the 2 higher realm cultivators. If he could rely on others so easily, that would be one thing. But Zhou Chun still believed the divine fire hall was within the altar, so he wasn't afraid of the higher realm experts. At worst, he would summon the divine fire hall. With his current power, he could fully absorb his true form. Once that happened, he could control the divine fire hall and suppress the entire red-eyed realm. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to enter. Seeing that Zhou Chun was unwilling to cooperate, Xianxia shifted his full attention to Wei Zhouxian. Let's work together. Brother Wei, if we collaborate, I only need 30% of the ancient demon. I will help you kill Zhou Chun, and afterward, I'll leave with my junior sister and never return to the red-eyed realm. Though Xianxia said this, how could he never return after gaining such a great advantage? With 30% of the ancient demon's blood and flesh, he could create a life body 2,000 times stronger. Although it would be less than 100 feet tall, it would be enough for him to transcend. After that, he could return to the red-eyed realm, seize the rest of the body, and destroy the entire realm. No one would know of the benefits he had reaped. As for his junior sister, she was from the same sect. At worst, they could split the gains evenly, which would be enough for both of them to reach the immortal level. He couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement welling up from deep within. At that moment, Wei Zhouxian responded with a single word. Agreed. The cooperation was accepted. Xianxia was even more thrilled. Immediately, he pulled his junior sister over to stand beside Wei Zhouxian. Speaking righteously, Zhou Chun, the things you've done with Li Miao are utterly despicable. Today, we, the righteous cultivators, will offer you as a sacrifice for the sake of all beings under the heavens. Ha ha ha! Zhou Chun, upon hearing this, couldn't contain his laughter. He laughed at the other's hypocrisy and at his ignorance. A cultivator from the upper realm, here in the Crimson Eyes realm, ridding it of demons and upholding the Tao. If the common folk knew, they'd probably hang a plaque for you and offer their prayers. Wouldn't they? Xianxia didn't flinch, sneering coldly. That would still be better than being a filthy scoundrel like you. Both of them, in truth, knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. But winning was not merely a matter of virtue. In fact, in terms of virtue, Zhou Chun might even have had a slight edge over Xianxia. You lot just want the ancient demon's body. I've inherited the god's eye, and I know what you're planning. Stop putting on a show in front of me, Wei Zhuxian said indifferently, but his words were a sharp slap in Xianxia's face. Fortunately, Xianxia's skin was thick enough. If his real name had been known, someone would surely have been pointing at him, cursing. Zhou Chun shrugged, his expression cold as he said, "It's good that you know. I'm going to use the ancient demon's body to help Li Miao refine a second one. If any of you have a problem with that, feel free to attack me at any time. I'll take you all on." He had already convinced himself of his invincibility. Xianxia gritted his teeth in fury. They wanted to take everything for themselves. What were they supposed to do? It was sheer greed. To be honest, I'm not interested in ascending, nor am I interested in the ancient demon's body. If you want to take it, then take it. Wei Zhuxian moved aside, pointing at the ancient demon's corpse, and continued, "However, after you take it, you must leave the Crimson Eyes realm and swear never to return, never to disturb these mortals again." In truth, whether they swore or not didn't matter. Without treasures, who would even want to come to the mortal realm? So Wei Zhuxian wasn't worried about them going back on their word. He just wanted them gone. Either die by his hand or leave voluntarily. Wei, my brother, you may not know the full significance of the ancient demon's body. It is... Xianxia hurriedly tried to persuade him. He didn't want Wei Zhuxian to step back now. Just a moment ago, they had agreed to cooperate. Why stop the fight now? If Wei Zhuxian withdrew, it would be impossible for him to split anything with Zhou Chun peacefully. At this point, Zhou Chun's life level was already 5,000 times that of an ordinary special life form. How could Xianxia stand a chance? He had to drag Wei Zhuxian into the fight. Seeing that Wei Zhuxian remained unmoved, Xianxia realized this fool truly didn't care about the ancient demon's body. So, he attempted to lure him in with the Crimson Eyes realm. Wei, my brother, think carefully. Once Zhou Chun and I start fighting, I'll surely perish. Afterward, it will be just you. Do you really believe Zhou Chun will keep his promise then? Zhou Chun glanced briefly at Mongshan County City in the distance, where the Ghost Emperor had already successfully formed. Thanks to Li Miao using the Empress's pure body, all impurities had been cleansed from the Ghost Emperor, allowing for a swift fusion. The blood condensation array had also entered its second phase. He calmly spoke up, Wei Zhuxian, I'll admit, I have some respect for you, so I'll give you this opportunity. I promise that once I help Li Miao refine his body, I will ascend immediately. After that, I won't interfere with anything you do in this world. Initially, the plan was to kill these people. There was no need to keep them around. However, the Ghost Emperor had condensed too quickly, so there was no need for their souls anymore. Another reason was to leave a mark for Li Miao, motivating him to strive for greatness. Wei Zhuxian was, after all, Li Miao's inner demon. When the critical moment arrived, allowing Li Miao to descend might yield unexpected results. Immortal Zhou Chun, known for his strategic prowess, took one step, considering 9. At this moment, his words were intended to provoke Xianxia and see him lose his composure. A powerful figure from the upper realm, descending to the lower realm, being schemed against by a group of mortals, whether soft or hard approaches, was unable to defeat them. This was the truly amusing part. When Wei Zhuxian heard Zhou Chen's words, he paid no attention to Xianxia and only replied with a single word, "Fine." This left Xianxia in an awkward position. Anger, unwillingness, humiliation. He stood there, afraid to move, afraid to think, because he couldn't defeat Zhou Chun. But he was a strong figure from the upper realm at the pinnacle of the Yuan spirit stage. Now, he was being ridiculed by a group of mortals. Good, very good. Xianxia laughed in embarrassment. He pointed at Wei Zhuxian and Zhou Chun, enunciating each word. You two are ruthless. Since you've forced me into this, then we shall all perish together. As he finished speaking, he took out a dark green token. A powerful surge of thought power emanated from it, though the material was quite special. Xianxia gently squeezed, and the token shattered instantly. The powerful surge of thought power dispersed along with it. Buzz! In the next moment, the Red Eyes realm began to tremble. Space quaked constantly, and even the heavenly laws of this world began to shudder. A powerful pressure forced the heavenly laws to bow. At that moment, the strength of Xianxia and Fuqing surged dramatically. Even Zhou Chen's aura was rising. His life force was 5,000 times stronger, and if not for the suppression of the heavenly laws, he would have already broken through to the Yuan spirit stage. Now, with the suppression lifted, he instantly reached the pinnacle of the Yuan spirit stage. His aura was even stronger than that of Xianxia and Fuqing. Only Wei Jiuxian's aura remained unchanged. Is this your trump card? Wei Jiuxian observed everything, seemingly having anticipated it, and said indifferently, lifting the suppression of the heavenly laws to restore your cultivation? Xianxia let out a cold chuckle, though a bitter smile lingered on his face. I don't need to make a move. You'll soon understand. The heavens and earth trembled. In the shattered sky, a massive crack appeared. An overwhelming aura of invincibility radiated from within, making it impossible for anyone to breathe. Haha! I've been waiting for you. Zhu Chun was excited. He had long known about Zhang Xian's backup plan, which was nothing more than summoning a powerful figure from the upper realm. Those transcendent beings in the Great Perfection stage were not afraid of this small realm's heavenly laws. Therefore, their cultivation would not be suppressed. This gave Zhou Chan the opportunity to capture a Great Perfection cultivator alive. He immediately flew back to Mongshan City, retrieved the blood-red altar, and shouted, "Come forth, Temple of Divine Fire!" Everyone stared at him like he was a fool. The Temple of Divine Fire did not appear. The blood-red altar also shattered in that moment. How could this be? Zhou Chun was shocked. The altar crumbled, and its final essence of blood had been absorbed by the blood-condensing formation. Nothing was left, not even the aura of his true body. At this moment he was utterly bewildered. In the void, Jian Wushuang grasped Zhou Chen's true body, observing everything with a faint smile. After watching for so long, he had finally understood their plans. Unfortunately, they had encountered him. Otherwise, Zhou Chun and Li Miao could indeed have achieved great things. In the Red Eyes realm, they were truly being stifled. Right now, Jian Wushuang didn't plan to reveal himself because the being in the crack had yet to emerge. True powerhouses were always the last to take the stage. Revealing himself too early wouldn't have the desired effect. Besides, the blood-condensing formation had not yet finished forming a physical body. Once the physical body had condensed, it wouldn't be too late to swoop in and take the spoils. Jian Wushuang concealed Immortal Zhou Chun in the void. At that moment, in the sky outside Mongshan City, a massive human face emerged. Disciple Wuyan greets Master. Xianxia bowed with an indescribable expression as he faced his master. He was truly unlucky. He had stumbled upon such a grand opportunity, yet it happened in the mortal world, causing his master to descend, and now everything was lost. When Fuqing saw the newcomer, she also bowed and greeted, "True Lord Yihua." Although this person wasn't her master but rather a senior uncle, she still had to address him respectfully in front of outsiders. Faced with such a powerful presence, Wei Jiuxian appeared insignificant. Zhou Chun was utterly at a loss. He forcefully pulled Li Miao out of the grand formation, urgently saying, "Go, we must leave now." Boom! With Zhou Chen's current strength, he effortlessly tore open the space, and Li Miao followed suit. Without the Divine Fire Hall, they were no match for the cultivators at the Great Ascension stage. Staying would bring no benefit. If the opponent discovered that his life level was 5,000 times higher, he would undoubtedly be killed. Escape was the only option. There was no place to hide in the mortal world, so ascending immediately was their best bet. After all, the destination after Ascension was random, making it difficult for the enemy to track him down. although everything was gone with his life level and what he had witnessed in the past, he could quickly break through to the great Ascension stage in no time. By then, he would have the strength to protect himself and continue his journey, which wouldn't be too much of a failure. But if he lost his life, everything would truly be over. Li Miao, although unsure of what had happened, could tell from Zhou Chen's panic that something big had transpired. Without hesitation, the two of them shattered the void, attempting to leave this world. But just as they stepped into the rift, the massive human face, accompanied by flames from true Lord Yihua, lightly snorted, sealing the surrounding space. Trying to leave? Meeting me without even a greeting? You juniors have no manners. True Lord Yihua manipulated his power, pulling Zhou Chen and Li Miao, who were sealed in space, right in front of him. With just one glance at this world, he understood everything that had transpired. This was a being beyond the heavenly Tao, an existence so powerful it left everyone breathless. Xianxia remained silent, standing obediently in place, saying nothing and doing nothing. His master was present, and the more he spoke, the more trouble he would invite upon himself. Remaining calm might even earn him a reward, perhaps some ancient demon blood, making his millennium of toil not entirely in vain. Wei Zhouxian stood still, his brilliance concealed, yet he remained upright, expressionless, with no trace of emotion. It was as though the true lord posed no threat to him. Xianxia sneered inwardly, mocking Wei Zhouxian for his arrogance. But what was the outcome of such arrogance? Everyone was doomed. True Lord Yihua was no righteous figure. The ancient demon blood had already dissipated into the world. Although only a small amount was lost, it was still a valuable treasure, not something to be wasted. He might even refine the entire Crimson Eyes realm to recover the lost blood. As for the fate of mortals, true Lord Yihua cared nothing about their survival. What's the use of arrogance? The path of a cultivator requires fortune, wealth, companions, and land, not arrogance. Xianxia sighed inwardly. Wei Zhouxian was destined to fail and would pay with his life. His calm expression now was likely due to the fact that Wei Zhouxian had never encountered such a powerful existence before and was probably scared senseless. As for himself, although his efforts over the past millennium had been in vain, it was still better than losing his life. He still had his sect, his master, and his fellow disciples. Upon returning to the upper realm, he would still be that little Xianxia. It was a somewhat derogatory title, but also a sign that his seniors believed in him and thought he had the potential to become immortal. Huff! Zhou Chen, sealed in space, gazed at true Lord Yihua, his eyes brimming with fear and unwillingness. Why did the divine fire hall disappear? Why? His heart roared in agony, but no one answered him. True Lord Yihua glanced at the two of them, finally locking his gaze onto immortal Zhou Chen. You've crafted this body quite well. What method did you use? He asked. Zhou Chen gritted his teeth, furious. I know you won't spare me. Even if I told you, it would still end in death. Do you think I'll speak? In truth, it was possible to search their souls, but both of their souls had reached a level of 500-fold, which made it impossible for true Lord Yihua to perform the search. This was because his own soul level wasn't as high as the two before him. At this moment, Xianxia finally spoke, breaking the silence. Master, they've set up a grand array within that city, divided into two formations. One is a Death Chi formation that can elevate the soul's level to 500-fold. The other is a Blood Condensation formation, which can refine the physical body to 5,000-fold. The former requires mortal souls as nourishment, while the latter needs the ancient demon's essence blood. True Lord Yihua could clearly see the entanglements of fate among everyone, yet he couldn't discern what was hidden within the restrictions inside the city. After all, he hadn't yet reached the level of an immortal, so there were things he still didn't understand. Now, hearing his disciple's clear explanation, he was momentarily shaken but quickly regained his composure. It's quite the clever trick. With that, he stopped looking at Zhou Chen, knowing the man was a tough nut to crack. Instead, he turned his attention to Zhou Chen's companion. You possess a body free of evil. Your potential is impressive, so why are you entangled with demonic cultivators? True Lord Yi Hua asked, feigning curiosity. At this moment, Li Miao's heart trembled, both at the immense power of true Lord Yi Hua and his own failure. Why had he failed? Even now, he didn't understand. Nor did he comprehend why such a powerful being had appeared here. Sensing that true Lord Yi Hua held some favor toward him, Li Miao didn't know how to respond. In the past, he might have begged for mercy. But this time, he chose to maintain the composure of a disciple of the Immortals, although deep within, the bitterness of defeat still pulsed. Given what he knew of himself, he wouldn't be able to endure this much longer. True Lord Yi Hua, being who he was, could see through Li Miao's pretense at a glance. Despite this, he wasn't angered. Rather, he was a little disappointed, like a teacher lamenting a student's failure to meet expectations. Do you know how unique your body is? Even in the ancient domain, it's rarely seen. Once you ascend, many old masters will likely fight to take you as their disciple. With your potential, transcending the ordinary won't be difficult for you. This simple assessment was like dangling an enormous prize before him. Before, according to what his immortal master had said, he had the potential for immortality. But between his immortal master and true Lord Yi Hua, Li Miao found himself more inclined to trust the latter, because his power was undeniable. Zhou Chun had experienced too much and immediately saw through the ploy. He glanced at Li Miao, and his heart settled on a plan. Although the two of them had never officially taken on a master-disciple relationship, their bond was deeper than such formalities. If offering himself as a bargaining chip would allow Li Miao to become the disciple of true Lord Yi Hua, then perhaps this would be Zhou Chen's final gift to him. At that moment, true Lord Yi Hua continued, "Young one, would you be willing to take me as your master?" Li Miao, this is a heaven-sent opportunity for you. My teacher is a figure who can dominate the ancient domain. Once you become his disciple, your path will be much smoother. Xianxia Wuyan chimed in at this moment to help persuade. However, deep down, Li Miao was utterly unwilling. Ever since his physique had been transformed, he was no weaker than Wuyan, and he might even surpass him. By then, if he had to deal with someone like Li Miao frequently, it would undoubtedly irritate him. If it were his ancestor, it would be different. After all, he only respected that great Tang ancestor. Honest and upright, with someone like that, you would never be at a disadvantage. It was a friendship where you could fully trust the other person to have your back. Who wouldn't want a junior brother like that? What he didn't know was that his master's real reason for extending the olive branch to Li Miao was because of immortal Zhou Chun. The ancient demon's physical body and blood essence weren't important in the eyes of true Lord of Karma. Even the formation that could refine the physical body wasn't important because it required too many treasures. After achieving transcendence, the materials needed to alter his physical body were far too numerous, and it would be impossible to afford the cost. However, advancement in the level of the soul, now that was different. The nourishment the formation required was merely the souls of mortals. The upper realm had no shortage of mortals, and there was also an endless supply of cultivators' souls, all of which could be used as nourishment. That was what he valued, because the secret art of the divine eye and the Tao that followed immortality required elevation of the soul. The higher the soul level, the greater one's comprehension. That was what true Lord of Karma truly valued. After all, his perspective was different. Most of the people he interacted with were at the Mahayana stage, and some were even immortal beings. He understood that the path after immortality was one's personal Tao. There were stronger and weaker Taos. Some were supreme, while others were mere trifles. There was even the ultimate Tao and special Taos as well. These were not determined by the level of the physical body but by comprehension. Though many followed the path of divine power due to the secret art of the divine eye, that path was far more distant. At the very least, one had to be at the level of a great emperor before coming into contact with divine power. Moreover, the divine power path still required augmentation from the Tao. In this interconnected path, the physical body could be improved with hard work later, so there was no rush. But comprehension was different. The sooner it was raised, the more benefits it would bring for the future. Thus, true Lord of Karma was willing to lower his pride, pretending to be courteous in front of a mere mortal, just to obtain the formation that advanced the soul. Of course, taking on a disciple with such an innocent physique wasn't a loss either, as he would gain an ally who might one day become a transcendent powerhouse. With such a tempting offer, Li Miao hesitated. He thought he could hold out a little longer, but he hadn't expected. His Tao heart was so fragile. Li Miao trembled as he lowered his head, speaking with respect. "Senior, I am willing to accept you as my master." With this one sentence, the bond of master and disciple between him and immortal Zhou Chun was shattered. Though Zhou Chun felt deeply helpless in his heart, all he could do was sigh. He remembered the past. A young, introverted prince had been playing in the palace when he accidentally stumbled upon a storeroom filled with strange and rare items, where he discovered Zhou Chen's existence. At first, Zhou Chun attached himself to the prince. Later, he helped the prince ascend to the throne, and the prince became the emperor of the Tang dynasty, aiding this immortal master in reconstructing his physical body. Scene after scene of memories flashed by, and Zhou Chen's heart felt as though it was being cut by a knife. Even though he was heartbroken, he couldn't bear to see Li Miao perish alongside him. Perhaps this was a good way for him to find peace. However, he himself had lost that peace. Amidst his sorrowful thoughts, Li Miao spoke again. This time, he directly knelt and prostrated himself on the ground, his tone even more respectful as he said, "Please have mercy, true Lord of heavenly fire, spare immortal Zhou Chen's life. Your disciple is willing to serve you like a beast of burden, without a word of complaint." At these words, the true Lord of heavenly fire's brow furrowed. Zhou Chun, however, felt a warmth bloom in his heart, and his eyes reddened with a feeling he couldn't put into words. It felt as if, after raising a child for so many years and believing the child belonged to someone else, a blood test revealed they were a perfect match. "How dare you? It is an honor that my master is willing to take you as his disciple, an opportunity for you. And yet you dare to make demands." Xianxia, without hesitation, seized every opportunity to step on Li Miao, preferably to crush him entirely. He had no desire to become a fellow disciple with someone like this. "Little one, do you know the consequences of making demands of me?" The true Lord of heavenly fire's massive, illusory face began to revert to its true form, transforming into a human shape. His appearance mirrored that of the giant face, tall and imposing. Though his features had frozen in the image of a mortal in their 60s, his body remained incredibly strong. In short, he appeared to be an elderly man with white hair but with a powerful and robust physique. In this fully restored form, his presence grew even more oppressive. The pressure was so overwhelming that even Zhou Chun and Li Miao struggled to breathe. "Li Miao," Zhou Chun spoke with great difficulty. "There's no need to plead on my behalf. I can tell him the secret of the soul advancement formation." This information was highly sensitive, and once revealed, the true Lord would surely pursue more of Zhou Chen's secrets. However, Zhou Chen had already made up his mind. For Li Miao's sake, he would rather sink into damnation than face death together. Li Miao, in his simplicity, genuinely believed that revealing the soul advancement formation would be enough to spare Zhou Chen's life. The true Lord of heavenly fire waved his hand, and Zhou Chun was absorbed into his ring. The two communicated through thought power, leaving those outside unaware of what was said. "Very well. I do not intend to take his life." The true Lord of heavenly fire's mood improved significantly, for he had just learned a shocking secret. A secret regarding the first sequence of inheritance. His journey to the lower realm to rescue his disciple had not been in vain. The benefits he'd gained were greater than what he'd acquired from years of wandering the outside world. After collecting Zhou Chun, he turned his gaze toward the massive ancient demon's body and casually stored it within his space ring. In high spirits, the true Lord of heavenly fire smiled and said, "Wu Yan, there is some lingering ancient demon essence in this place. It should not go to waste. Start refining it now and extract the demon blood from the Crimson Eye realm. I shall head into the city for a look around." "Yes, master." Jinxian Wuyan was excited. To refine the demon blood of the Crimson Eye realm, that meant the blood would be his. Although there wasn't much, it was certainly better than nothing. Even if only a tenth of the demon blood remained, it would be enough to elevate his life level. But on second thought, Wu Yan realized it wouldn't be that simple. The Crimson Eye realm still contained billions of mortals. Wouldn't it be a waste to refine them all? And now that his master had obtained the soul advancement formation, at this realization Zhenxian Wu Yan understood. His master intended to make him do all the heavy lifting. Refining billions of mortals would be no problem for a transcendent powerhouse. But for him, who hadn't yet transcended, it would incur karma. However, that karma was nothing compared to the benefits of ancient demon blood. Heh! Seems like Master wants to leave a good impression on the junior disciple. Zhenxian Wuyan sneered inwardly, but dared not express any dissatisfaction. He began to refine the entire Crimson Eye realm. Ever since the true Lord of Heavenly Fire had descended, Wei Zhouxian had been nothing more than a background figure, standing at the edge of the clouds, completely ignored. No one bothered with him. It was as if he had been forgotten entirely. Outside the ancient castle, the powerful cultivators of the Xianxia Tower, along with Xiangyang and the others, all looked up toward the sky. The massive face that had just appeared left a huge impact on them. They had no idea what was happening. Only Xiangyang knew. A powerful being from the upper realm had descended. This is bad. Brother Wushuang still hasn't appeared. What is he waiting for? Xiangyang's heart was filled with anxiety. But there was nothing he could do. In the next moment, the color of the sky changed, and these cultivators began to rise into the air as if an enormous force was pulling them up. It felt like they were being dragged away by a giant suction force. High in the sky, a giant sun appeared. Zhenxian, standing silent, formed a hand seal with one hand and shouted, "Devour the heavens and earth." This was a type of condensed divine ability. Devouring a section of the heavens and earth, then condensing the power within it. However, this method was cumbersome, and the power gained was minuscule. But if the world being condensed contained the ancient demon's essence blood, then the harvest would be much greater. Not only would the world be condensed, but along with it, billions of mortals and countless cultivators would be absorbed as well. One part would be the ancient demon's essence blood, and another part would be billions of souls. Ha! A soft sigh caught Zhenxian's attention. It was Wei Zhouxian. He exhaled lightly and looked helplessly at Zhenxian, his tone stiff as he spoke. Why? Why, after gaining so much, do you still covet these things? Are cultivators truly driven by endless greed? Why do you always disregard mortals as humans? Do you not realize that you yourself once walked the path from mortal to immortal? Why do you always believe that mortals cannot resist? Why so many questions? If you weren't pretending to be noble, would I have ended up like this? Zhenxian sneered, paying no further attention to Wei Zhouxian. After all, they would all soon die in the condensation process. Li Miao had originally intended to say something, but upon noticing Zhenxian's cold indifference toward him, he abandoned the thought. When he turned to look at Wei Zhouxian, the jealousy and bitterness in his heart had faded, replaced by a sense of pity for the other man. Why bother? Li Miao shook his head slightly. Wei Zhouxian, standing midair, clenched one hand into a fist, while gripping a spear in the other. He muttered to himself with his head lowered, then shook his head again, finding his words childish, unable to express them. But when an opposing aura surged toward him, he suddenly raised his head, his eyes full of killing intent, and shouted, "I ask you, why?" The roar startled everyone. Wei Zhouxian had finally let out the anger he'd been suppressing for so long. True Lord Yihua, who had just entered Mongshan City, also paused. He had never taken Wei Zhouxian seriously, but at that moment, after sensing the strange aura around him, he sized him up for the first time. Interesting. Looking at Wei Zhouxian, True Lord Yihua turned to Zhenxian and said, "Leave this little one alive." With that, he paid no further attention to him. However, just as he was turning away, The aura around Wei Jiuxian plummeted sharply. Not good. True Lord Yihua's figure flashed, trying to intervene, but it was too late. In that instant, the seemingly unremarkable Wei Jiuxian had pierced through Xianxia's chest with a spear, shattering his body and even his soul. Xianxian looked in disbelief at the hole in his chest. His reaction had been even slower than his master's. By now, it was already his final breath. He had fallen, completely fallen, as Wei Jiuxian's spear had pierced through his chest, leaving him dead beyond any hope of revival. As Wei Jiuxian struck, the life seed within his body began to erupt. His entire being surged with energy, his aura rising by several levels. This was the seed of life that the woman in white had left him back then. With it, he could protect the Tang Empire of the Eastern Lands and even the Red-Eyed Realm. It's actually a seed of life. True Lord Yihua also sensed the aura at that moment, his face filled with shock. In the mortal realm, to encounter such a treasure, this was something that even immortals would fight over. My luck is incredible. At this moment, he felt no sadness over the death of his disciple, only excitement. Coming to the mortal realm, not only had he acquired a soul-advancing formation, but also the complete corpse of an ancient demon. And now, he had stumbled upon a seed of life. At this moment, he felt like he was the chosen one of this world. Haha! This realm truly is my lucky domain. I almost don't want to destroy it. True Lord Yihua was ecstatic. He looked at Wei Jiuxian and said excitedly, "Boy, give me that seed inside you, and maybe I'll spare your life." Fu Qing stood silently to the side, glancing at his senior brother's corpse, then at True Lord Yihua, but in the end he said nothing. The death of Xianxian was worthless in the face of the seed of life. Li Miao opened his mouth, but it wasn't because he had anything to say. It was the despair he felt at Wei Jiuxian's continuous displays of power, each time surpassing his limits by countless folds. Just what kind of inheritance had he obtained? Only Wei Jiuxian knew. Facing True Lord Yihua now, he knew he stood no chance, but he was determined to give it his all. "You'll take nothing from me but my life." Wei Jiuxian pulled out the burning seed of life and crushed it with one hand. The overwhelming power surged through him, nearly tearing his body apart. It was clear he couldn't contain such power. True Lord Yihua watched the seed of life being crushed and felt an intense pain in his heart. He raged. That was a seed of life. What a waste. An absolute waste. Even though the seed had been shattered, the power remained, though its value was far less than if it had been intact. So Wei Jiuxian had to die. "Boy, you've angered me now." True Lord Yihua flicked his fingers, and two fireballs as bright as the sun formed instantly, hurtling toward Wei Jiuxian. The scorching heat swept over him, but Wei Jiuxian didn't dodge. He raised his spear, which shot forward like a dragon, charging straight into the flames. Hidden in the void, Jian Wushuang watched this scene and shook his head in resignation. If he hadn't appeared in this world, it would most likely be doomed. Still, even with his presence, he wouldn't act rashly. At most, he'd wait for one side to win, then step in to clean up the mess, claim the treasure, and leave. At least Xiangyang and Jiangshang weren't in any mortal danger. Zhu Chen's true body was also watching. Earlier, when his clone had revealed the soul-advancing formation to save Li Miao, he had felt a moment of confusion, because he had never experienced something like this. On the ground, the powerful members of the Xianxia Tower outside the ancient castle saw their commander displaying such immense strength, and they couldn't help but cheer. At that moment, even if they all died in battle, it would be worth it. Because this was the Tang Empire, where only mighty warriors fell in battle. There were no weaklings who knelt and begged for mercy. The emperor of the Tang Empire? From now on, the Tang Empire would have no emperor, only one name. Wei Jiuxian. The Tang Empire could live without an emperor, but it could never live without Wei Jiuxian. In the mortal realm, there are strong beings too. Xiangyang couldn't help but exclaim in awe. Jiangshang, on the other hand, gazed at the stream of green energy, feeling a sense of familiarity. It was just like what her mother had once left for her. It was nurturing inside her body, Would it eventually grow into something like this? Curiosity filled her heart, but at this moment, she understood that her mother came from the higher realms and was no longer part of this world. Within Mongshan County City, there wasn't a single living being left, only dried-up pools of blood and shattered remnants of soul power. A gust of wind blew through, and suddenly, a sky-piercing lotus sprang from the ground. The power on the lotus was weak, but as a surge of life force descended, it began to grow rapidly. In the sky, Wei Zhouxian couldn't withstand the might of true Lord Yihua, his entire body covered in wounds. At this moment, his power had already reached the extreme of mortal limits, the pinnacle of the primordial spirit. There was no way he could become stronger without transcending. He had been immortal, relying on external forces to grow stronger, but he could never directly transcend. Now he was barely clinging to life, yet he hadn't let go of the long spear in his hand. Boy, you can't stop me, and yet you waste such precious life force. What a waste! True Lord Yihua cried out anxiously. He didn't care at all that he was a transcendent existence, because life force was far too valuable to him. As long as he obtained it, he had the hope of becoming an immortal. He had been stuck at this level for far too long. With the Soul Ascension Array, he could enhance his soul power, and as his soul power increased, so would his comprehension, allowing him to comprehend his own Tao marks and become eternal. And life force contained the essence of life itself. If he had a life seed, he could nurture it to a certain point and directly ascend to immortality. Unfortunately, the seed had been crushed by Wei Zhouxian, leaving only the life force. But even that life force was enough for him to break through to immortality. It would just take a bit longer. But he could ultimately break through without relying on comprehension. Now, watching the life force steadily drain away, he felt deeply frustrated, yet he couldn't take down his opponent. There was once a shortcut placed right before me, and I failed to seize it. True Lord Yihua fumed with anger. Now all he wanted was to kill Wei Zhouxian out of sheer rage. Boy! Today I'll show you the consequences of angering me. True Lord Yihua unleashed his full power, revealing the strength of a transcendent being. In an instant, his entire form merged into a sea of fire. What had once been an ordinary sea of flames now turned into black fire. Yihua! The Yihua descended. The sky was completely scorched and turned into void. The ground was burned clean in an instant. Mountains and cities all vanished. Everything was obliterated. However, the destruction was limited, covering only a 1,000-mile radius within Mongshan County. The cultivators who had been outside the ancient castle, merely watching the spectacle, were suddenly pulled into the void the moment they sensed the Yihua flames. Even true Lord Yihua himself hadn't noticed. Naturally, this was Jian Wushuang's doing. He didn't want to just stand by and watch as Xiangyang and Jiangshang were burned alive. At that moment, in the void, only two figures remained. One was Wei Zhouxian, and the other was true Lord Yihua. Standing within the Yihua flames, Wei Zhouxian remained upright. He gripped his long spear with both hands, struggling to stay afloat in the air. Slowly, with every last bit of strength left in his body, he extended one hand and roared out the final words trapped in his chest. Mortal Wei Zhouxian, invoke the god. As the words left his mouth, his entire body collapsed, falling from the flames. He fell in the direction where Mongshan County had once stood. Now, this place was shrouded in darkness, hollow and abyss-like, as if no life had ever existed there. Yet, within that darkness, a single green lotus flower began to expand. It grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, soon reaching the size of a lotus platform. Wei Zhouxian's body landed on the lotus platform, and he immediately fell unconscious, but his hand still gripped the long spear tightly. He lay atop the platform as the last traces of his life force were completely drained, turning the entire lotus a blood-red hue. Witnessing this scene, true Lord Yihua was puzzled. What is this? He couldn't quite understand the meaning behind the blood-red lotus platform. But soon, the color shifted back to green. The vitality of the lotus grew boundlessly, reaching a level that even caused true Lord Yihua to tremble in fear. This This is a lotus of life seeds. True Lord Yi Hua couldn't believe what he was seeing. A single life seed was already a priceless treasure. But here, atop this lotus platform, were countless life seeds. And the most precious part was the platform itself. It was worth infinitely more than any supreme treasure. Hidden in the void, Jian Wushuang was also astonished. This was something he hadn't expected. If he hadn't been lurking in the void, he wouldn't have seen this unfold. The lotus of life. It was indeed a super treasure, reminding him of the fabled flower of the other shore. Absolutely one of the most valuable treasures among the emperors. Universe masters didn't necessarily need it, but they certainly wouldn't refuse it. A transcendent cultivator in the great perfection stage would undoubtedly be envious. Not only was true Lord Yi Hua envious, but even Jian Wushuang felt a burning desire for it. If he had waited before, it was to secure an opportunity for Xiangyang and Zhangshang. But now he, too, sought this opportunity for himself. Fortunately, the lotus was still there, couldn't run away, and he wasn't worried that true Lord Yi Hua could steal it, because Wei Jiuxian had revived. The invocation of the god was something Jian Wushuang had never seen before, and it seemed that the god Wei Jiuxian had invoked was a true deity. At this moment, only Wei Jiuxian's willpower remained. His physical body and soul had already perished long ago. Only his willpower drove him to continue. True Lord Yi Hua, I will make sure you stay in the Scarlet Eye realm forever, turn you completely mortal, and imprison you in the Scarlet Eye realm for eternity, so you can truly experience the joys of being immortal. The first sentence was spoken in Wei Jiuxian's voice. But after that, both the power and movements changed. From the lotus platform, Wei Jiuxian hurled the long spear in his hand, transforming it into a streak of rainbow light that pierced through space, heading straight for true Lord Yi Hua. No! True Lord Yi Hua roared, but it was too late. The long spear pierced his chest, and like his disciple before him, he died under the spear's blade. And there was another unlucky soul, his nephew Fu Qing, who had perished in his own Yi Hua flames. One could say Fu Qing was the unluckiest of them all. The moment Wei Jiuxian threw the spear, his body turned into a statue and fell from the lotus platform. His last thread of willpower began to fade away. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang used his thought power to wrap Wei Jiuxian's final thread of will in a gentle force. He condensed a wisp of his soul, imbued with his own thought power, and injected it into Wei Jiuxian's remaining will. However, Wei Jiuxian had only his will left, and it had fallen into slumber. Reviving him would be incredibly difficult. But helping him return to the heavenly cycle of reincarnation would be easy. With a flick of his hand, Jian Wushuang sent his soul into the cycle of reincarnation. This was the reincarnation of the Scarlet Eye realm. Wei Jiuxian would be reborn in the Scarlet Eye realm, though his memories would be wiped clean. It's over. Jian Wushuang sighed silently. The cultivators within the Crimson Eye realm, whether from the upper realm or the natives, had all given their best. They had planned and schemed only to end up here. Jian Wushuang led Zhangshang and the others out of the void. In the dark void, a cloud ignited in the eastern sky. Only Mongshan County was destroyed. The eastern lands had not yet fully descended into darkness. The sun continued to rise as usual. I never expected this to be the ending. Xiangyang looked at the lotus platform and sighed. Yang Shao gazed at the place where the chief commander had disappeared, remaining silent for a long time. Yet deep within, he harbored the resolve to inherit the chief's will. I can sense it. My clone hasn't died yet, and neither has Li Miao. Immortal Zhou Chen's true form didn't seem to care about anything else, still preoccupied with his clone. Jian Wushuang spoke up at this moment. They carry heavy karma. Do you still want to fuse with your clone? He had originally intended to help Zhou Chen return to his full strength, but seeing Zhou Chen's overwhelming obsession, he felt it wasn't necessary to proceed with the fusion. As for Li Miao, while his soul had returned to reincarnation and he wasn't technically dead, his path of cultivation was lost. He might not even manage to reincarnate, burdened with too much karmic debt, likely to be condemned to the abyss of endless torment. Forget it. Let him remain in this world forever. Immortal Juchen's true form seemed to come to terms with it at that moment. It seemed like everything had come to an end. And yet, it also felt as if something was just beginning. The lotus platform began to wither, but in an instant, a powerful life force blossomed. The aura was familiar. Jian Wushuang turned his gaze, and a figure appeared on the lotus platform. He alerted Xianxia, who also looked over. Upon seeing the woman in plain clothes, Xianxia froze on the spot, trembling as she stammered, "Mother? Is that you?" At first, she couldn't believe it, until the figure extended her hand. An ire! That figure exuded an indescribable affection, but when she called out her daughter's true name, a powerful force began to isolate her existence. She became panicked, her face filled with fear, and her voice grew urgent as she shouted at Xianxia, "Don't come, don't come, don't come, remember, never come looking for me." As she finished speaking, her figure began to vanish along with the lotus platform. Yet, as she turned for one last look at her daughter, she noticed the figure standing beside her. Boom! It was as if lightning struck her mind. Her entire body began trembling, and she frantically shook her head at Xianxia, as if to warn her to leave the figure's side. The person standing beside Xianxia was none other than Jian Wushuang. That figure was Xianxia's mother, Xianxia, and when she saw Jian Wushuang standing beside her daughter, the fear in her eyes surpassed even the force that was cutting her off. But in the end, she was unable to say anything. Jian Wushuang, upon seeing Xianxia, didn't quite know how to address her. He wanted to stop the isolating power but realized that it was origin source divine power, too strong. With his current strength, there was no way to intervene. But it would be rude to meet an old acquaintance with a cold face, so he forced a small smile. It was this smile that filled Xianxia's eyes with terror. Whoosh! Xianxia's figure completely disappeared, and at that moment, the lotus platform fully withered. Only a few dozen life seeds remained, which Jian Wushuang carefully gathered. "Mother!" Xianxia finally snapped out of it, rushing forward in a panic. Standing in the silent void, she couldn't find a trace of her mother's presence. In a daze, she stood there, tears streaming down her face, helpless. Her pitiful state tugged at Jian Wushuang's heart, and he couldn't bear to watch. He stepped forward to console her. "What appeared just now was likely a projection of your mother. This means she's still alive, probably in the ancient domain. Once you ascend, you might meet her again soon." "But my mother!" Xianxia looked up, her eyes bloodshot. Jian Wushuang understood what she meant. He patted her shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I'll help you. I told you I was friends with your mother. You don't have to worry." Since her mother had previously looked at Jian Wushuang in an unusual way, Zhang and I naturally had no reason to doubt it. She even suspected that Jian Wushuang might be her unknown father. If Jian Wushuang knew about this, he would probably have nightmares. Fortunately, she wasn't foolish and could tell that her personality and bloodline bore no resemblance to Jian Wushuang. The only thing they had in common was their use of swords. However, her swordsmanship had been taught by her mother, and it had nothing to do with Jian Wushuang. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of speculation as she wondered, perhaps Senior Jian Wushuang once admired my mother? This guess wasn't entirely wrong, because Jian Wushuang really had admired her in the past. Back when he first entered the ancient moon spacetime, he had admired the Heavenly Maiden. The Heavenly Maiden was Zhang Ni's mother, and this indeed counted as admiration. There had also been a time in the Qixin Temple when Jian Wushuang had become close with Zhang Ni's mother, which could be considered some sort of friendship. But that bond was not particularly strong. Just as Jian Wushuang was comforting Zhang and I, Xiangyang walked over at the worst possible time and asked in surprise, "Zhang and I, why did I hear your mother calling you Nair? Is that your childhood nickname?" Jian Wushuang rolled his eyes, feeling that this man always fixated on the strangest things. "I suppose so." Zhang and I, now calm, nodded and explained, "My real name is Zhang and I. After my mother left me in the Jiang kingdom, I disguised myself as a man and changed my name to Xianxia. Later, I met all of you." "I see." Xiangyang had a sudden look of realization and then said, "So now that you're back to being a woman, should we call you Zhang and I?" Zhang and I smiled warmly. In that moment, she finally displayed the kind of smile that only a young woman could have. That smile was also her farewell to the Red Eye realm. The journey of the three had just begun. This was merely an ordinary mortal world. Jian Wushuang had gained much here, from the initial despair to eventual peace, even feeling fortunate. All of this had changed him because of this place. So when he left, he transformed the Red Eye realm. From then on, this world became a true paradise, free from the rampages of the powerful, a place of peace. He completely filled the void, turning it into a vast plain. All the traces left by the northern region glacier and the entire cultivation world were erased one by one. The remaining cultivators, deprived of the power they once absorbed, began to see their cultivation levels decline. Eventually, they reverted to ordinary martial artists, with lifespans no different from those of mortals. Of course, he allowed some individuals to retain their power. For example, Xianxia remained a late-stage golden core cultivator, still at the peak of his power. As for Zhou Chen's clone, Jian Wushuang placed it within the heavenly Tao, embedding within it a deep sense of duty towards the revival of the human race. From that moment on, the Red Eye realm would be ruled by humans. After their power was stripped away, the demon beasts could only become wild animals. Furthermore, Jian Wushuang also rescued Chen Yuan's soul, and in the process, he brought back Miss Ah Zi's soul from the cycle of reincarnation, restoring their bodies together. It was indeed a pity for that rough man, Husan, as he couldn't revive the woman he loved. However, regenerating his severed arm was not difficult for Jian Wushuang. He also granted him a life of wealth and prosperity, which could be considered as repaying the first kind-hearted person they had encountered. After doing all of this, he reconsolidated the ancient demon's essence blood into 3 fleshy orbs. He then dropped a single drop of his own essence blood onto the 3 bodies. The life level of each of these bodies had reached 10,000 times the norm, and that was just the baseline. How much more they could advance would depend on the strength of the person occupying the body. Naturally, these 3 bodies were given to Xiangyang, Zhang and I, and Immortal Zhouchun himself. As it stood, there was only one Zhouchun without the distinction between a true self and a clone. After completing all of this, he stored the 3 into the 9-prison pagoda. He had given them the seeds of life, along with all the treasures he had plundered from the Crimson Eye realm, enough to help them reach the level of origin spirit. There was also a grand soul advancement formation, with the seeds of life as nourishment. It was enough for them to master the bodies of the special life forms, and once they emerged from seclusion, they would transcend. Having done all of this, Jian Wushuang was free of lingering concerns. Using his form as a sword, he slashed open the space of the Crimson Eye realm and ascended to the ancient domain. In the upper realm within the ancient domain hadn't been in existence for very long, only a few 100,000 years. But within these few 100,000 years, several brilliant eras had arisen. The first era saw the rise of the 108 ancient domains and the 108 ancient demons, unmatched in their might. This era was long, reigning over the cosmos for a full 100,000 years. After 100,000 years, the ancient demon era was destroyed by the human race's ancient court. Most of the ancient demons fell, while the rest were suppressed, forming countless mortal worlds. Their essence blood scattered across the realms, sparking the Ascension era. During the Ascension era, the ancient domain was entirely ruled by ascendants. Even the remaining 72 ancient domains were firmly under the control of the ascendants. The founder of the ancient court, Yuanzhang Celestial Venerable, formally stepped down during this time, passing the title of Lord of the ancient court to his disciple, the strongest of all ascendants. This was Xianxia of the 3 talents. This was the age of the ascendants, but it was a brief one, lasting only a few tens of thousands of years. The power that supported the mortal worlds, derived from the ancient demons, was quickly exhausted. The ancient domain entered a new era, the era of Divine Eye. The Divine Eye techniques had existed since the birth of the ancient domain, and the strength of the human race was inseparable from the legacy of the divine eye. However, because the ascendants were numerous, and most of them combined divine eye techniques with powerful physical bodies, they dominated the Ascension era. But as one mortal world after another fell into ruin, new ascendants from the ancient domain grew fewer and fewer. The Ascension era came to a complete end. The era of divine eye that followed was brought forth by one being who fused two different legacies into one. His emergence not only altered the Ascension era but also changed the entire power structure of the ancient domain. In the first two eras of the ancient domain, the ancient court ruled as the hegemon, governing all 72 ancient domains. However, with the integration of the two legacies by the divine eye inheritor, a divine eye sacred land was summoned. The arrival of this sacred land shifted the balance of power, breaking the ancient court's dominance. From that point on, the 72 ancient domains were split into two major factions. One was the ancient court and the other was the divine eye sacred land. The one who summoned the sacred land became known as the Sacred Lord, a title akin to the Lord of the Heavenly Court. The two forces frequently clashed, with each side ruling 36 ancient domains, both flourishing in their own right. Of course, there was always a gap between the new and the old factions. For instance, the old faction represented by the ancient court was more conservative and balanced. Although the divine eye secret technique was powerful, it was merely a stepping stone on the path of divine power in the future. Therefore, they did not regard the divine eye inheritance as their true path. The new faction, on the other hand, was more extreme. Not only did they burn their immortal divine power using the divine eye inheritance, but they also integrated it into their own path, even to the point of burning their own path for it. This explosive power surpassed other experts of the same level. Countless divine eye inheritors tried to emulate this, which caused disdain from the old faction. They believed such actions would ruin all cultivators in the ancient domain, leading to a split. The ancient court represented balance, while the Holy Land represented extremity. In truth, neither side was wrong. It was simply a difference in understanding. Burning one's path wasn't inherently problematic, but it depended on how it was done. To be precise, it needed to be controlled. One couldn't blindly burn their own path marks just to increase battle power, as this would affect their future path to becoming an emperor. If one prematurely overdraws their path's power, although the strength gained is formidable, once they reach the point of merging with the Tao, problems would arise. The path after immortality is relatively smooth, with the merge with the Tao being the most challenging checkpoint. After merging with the Tao, one's battle power would transform drastically. One shouldn't sacrifice their future merge with the Tao just to increase power in the immortal phase. This was the crux of the conflict between the ancient court and the Holy Land. Burning one's own origin source path would lead to immense glory during the immortal stage, but they would be left dumbfounded when it came time to merge with the Tao. However, there were exceptions. If not, the Holy Land wouldn't have risen so quickly. This was because one particular inheritor who fused two major sequences succeeded in merging with the Tao. Not only did they succeed, but their battle power after merging was so formidable that they could take on 100 opponents alone. Even the ancient Yuanzhang Heavenly Lord and the #1 expert among the Ascenders, Xianxia of the Three Talents, were no match for him. Additionally, due to the divine power secret technique, he became the absolute strongest in the 72 ancient domains. Besides him, 3 other experts from the Holy Land also successfully merged with the Tao. Although their strength wasn't as overwhelming as that of the Holy Master, they could rival Yuanzhang Heavenly Lord. It was rumored that these 3, when combined, could challenge 2 generations of ancient court masters. However, for most Holy Land experts, succeeding in merging with the Tao was exceedingly difficult. After 100,000 years, only 4 had succeeded. One of them had fused 2 major sequences, while the other 3 had merely perfected 2 sequences without choosing to merge them into the Tao. Only 4 emperors had emerged in 100,000 years. Though each of them was incredibly powerful, the number was too small. They were far outnumbered by the ancient court. The ancient court had the oldest inheritance and prided themselves on taking the correct path. The strength of one's path varied, but those who cultivated a powerful origin source path would not be weaker than the Holy Land inheritors after merging with the Tao. Even those with weaker paths had an advantage, as the difficulty of merging with the Tao was reduced. Thus, the ancient court had the most emperors, with a full 100 emperors in their ranks. Among them, the strongest was Xianxia of the 3 talents, followed by Yuanzheng Heavenly Lord, and lastly, the 3rd generation master of the ancient court. The strength of these 3 individuals was also not to be underestimated, which was why the ancient court's development remained the most stable. They did not have the intense conflicts found in the 36 ancient domains within the Holy Land. In contrast, they were relatively peaceful. Present, what Jian Wushuang sought was this very peace. 100 years had passed since his ascension. Now, he stood within the holy city of the heaven altar in the ancient domain of the overturning sea. In these 100 years, he had simultaneously studied the 9-prison pagoda token and meditated on his own path. His current realm remained the same as when he ascended, still at the peak of the great perfection stage. There hadn't been much progress. Mainly because, during these 100 years, he hadn't ventured out in search of treasures to break through his own limits. Even though he was rebuilding, he still faced bottlenecks. And these bottlenecks weren't small. It couldn't be helped. His current physical foundation was that of a realm beast, which had limitless growth potential. His soul, too, carried the will of a realm beast, making it incredibly resilient and also limitless in growth. Therefore, his path had to match this limitless growth. He had already mastered the ultimate path and the extreme path, so he didn't need to expend much effort to grasp them again. Over the years, he had thoroughly explored the entire ancient domain. In particular, he had gained a clear understanding of the origin source after reaching the level of the Immortal. This world was beneath the Realm God continent, so it was different from space-time, but it was very similar to the Realm God continent. The only difference was that the Realm God continent didn't have the so-called Divine Eye legacy. The Divine Eye legacy came from his senior brother Ghost Eye. Since teacher Xianxia had taken him as a disciple, senior brother Ghost Eye's strength likely wasn't lacking. He might even have been a universe god, or perhaps even stronger. The legacy he left behind was undoubtedly powerful. The ancient domain comprised 72 universes, larger than the lower-tier primitive worlds, but smaller than the medium-tier worlds like the Great Division. If the 36 shattered universes were included, it could barely be considered a medium-tier world. From this, it could be inferred that other worlds, too, had high-tier and medium-tier worlds. This realm should be considered a vast universe. In 100 years, he had traveled through the entire ancient domain and had learned much about matters related to the heavens. However, if one wanted to reach the heavens, they first needed to leave the ancient domain. One had to enter the boundless chaos, traverse various alien worlds, and find the legendary sea of the universe. That was a sea that existed within the boundless chaos. Crossing the sea of the universe would lead one to the heavens. But to find the sea of the universe, one needed to be at least at the heavenly emperor level, which Jian Wushuang estimated was roughly equivalent to the absolute peak level. As for surviving the journey across the sea of the universe, one needed to surpass the heavenly emperor level. That meant reaching the level of a universe master. This was his estimation based on his knowledge. In truth, just leaving the ancient domain alone required someone to be at the great completion peak level. Entering the boundless chaos would require at least an immortal Xianxia, as the Xianxia had their own path and no longer needed to rely on external forces. Throughout the history of the ancient domain, many immortal Xianxians had left the ancient domain to venture into the boundless chaos. However, very few returned alive. Those who had journeyed to alien worlds and returned safely were mostly immortal pinnacles. In other words, only those with the power of a Tao Lord could traverse between two worlds. He calculated his current strength. Even breaking through to the immortal level was a challenge, so leaving the ancient domain wasn't a suitable choice for him. Thus, he decided to stay and improve to the immortal level within the ancient domain before making further plans. At the moment, he was in Tiantan City. Unlike the mortal realm, there were no taverns here. If a cultivator wanted to find a place to seclude themselves, they had to go to a special retreat called the Legacy Mountain. This place was under the jurisdiction of the sacred land. It had no cloud pavilions, which were another type of retreat found in the heavenly court, but only the legacy god mountain of the sacred land. The divine mountain loomed high, stretching for thousands of miles, with countless caves dotting its surface. From the foot of the mountain to the summit, the price of these caves varied significantly. Tian City, located in the heart of the ancient sea domain, was home to the legendary Divine Mountain, which itself stood at the core of the city. Naturally, it wasn't possible to train here for free. One had to pay for it. And the currency wasn't ordinary either. It required immortal crystals, treasures formed from the condensed origin source of immortal-level experts. These crystals were considered the hard currency throughout the ancient domain and even in foreign worlds. Jian Wushuang had once obtained only a few dozen immortal crystals from true Lord Yihua. But to cultivate on the Divine Mountain, even the price for staying at the foot of the mountain was exorbitant, so high that most cultivators in the Mahayana stage couldn't afford it. Fortunately, Jian Wushuang had mastered the origin source Tao. Yet, he had not broken through to immortality because he couldn't follow the same path anymore. With the physique and will of the realm beast, he needed to forge a new path. Thus, he had yet to make a breakthrough. After wandering for 100 years, he had stayed secluded in the Divine Mountain for decades, searching for his way forward. Even after 100 years of wandering and several decades of seclusion, he hadn't found a clear direction. At that moment, the token in his hand emitted a brilliant light, and the origin source power within the cave was instantly drained. There was no need to panic in situations like this. It wasn't that someone was causing trouble. It likely just meant his lease on the cave had expired. Friend Wushuang, the time for your lease on Cave A at the foot of the mountain has expired. Would you like to extend it? A pleasant voice echoed into the cave. If it hadn't been for the lease expiration, no one would have disturbed him. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, inwardly marveling at how absurdly expensive the caves on the Divine Mountain were. Just staying in a Grade A cave at the foot of the mountain for one 60-year cycle cost 10 immortal crystals. A Grade B cave required 5 crystals, a Grade C 3 crystals, and a Grade D 1 crystal. If it were a Grade A cave halfway up the mountain, it would cost 100 immortal crystals. As for the summit, even most immortal true sages couldn't afford to live there. He touched the ring on his finger and ultimately decided to leave. As he stepped out of the cave, he saw a female cultivator wearing a purple skirt. She had a graceful demeanor, and her every movement exuded an indescribable charm. This was the caretaker of the Grade A cave at the foot of the mountain, Fairy Ziyu. He had chatted with her a few times when he first arrived, and they were somewhat acquainted. I won't be extending it. After all these years in seclusion, I've gained nothing. I might as well go out and explore. Jian Wushuang wasn't about to admit he was out of money. In truth, he still had quite a few treasures on him. He just didn't plan on selling them. Plus, after secluding himself for one 60-year cycle, he had gained little, not even fully comprehending the 9-prison command. It seemed better to go out and explore, perhaps visit the ancient court's territory. Fairy Ziyu smiled warmly and said, "Friend Wushuang, you're already at the peak of the Mahayana stage. Breaking through to become an immortal true sage isn't easy. Why not venture into some dangerous places? You might just find a path suitable for your origin source Tao." She wasn't wrong. After all, she was an immortal sage herself and had continuously advanced, gaining quite a reputation among immortal true sages. Otherwise, she wouldn't have landed such a lucrative position at the Divine Mountain. However, she had no idea that Jian Wushuang now possessed 2 origin source Daos, and they were among the strongest. The ultimate sword Dao, a path of slaughter, was so rare that even among countless immortal experts, only a few had mastered it. By Jian Wushuang's estimation, when the Holy Lord of the Sacred Land succeeded in merging with the Dao, his origin source Dao's power was comparable to the ultimate Dao. That's why he was so terrifying. Among the 3rd-generation experts of the ancient court, their Dao mastery was merely at the 1st rank. In other words, no one in the entire ancient domain had mastered the ultimate Dao. If it weren't for the inheritance of the divine eye, even if he were thrown into the original universe of the northern sky, he wouldn't stand out. And he, himself, had mastered both the ultimate Dao and the extreme Dao. It wasn't possible to abandon these two Daos, and forging a new Dao was far from easy. Fairy Ziyu, you've traveled far and wide, and your friends span the entire ancient domain. If you come across any good opportunities, please keep me in mind. Jian Wushuang exchanged pleasantries with her, his expression calm and collected. To be honest, Ziyu Immortal Fairy did seem to have some interest in him. A lot of what he knew about the world of the ancient domain came from Ziyu Immortal Fairy herself. In fact, it was at her invitation that he entered Tiantan City. They had met in an ancient place within the overturning sea region. At that time, Jian Wushuang had only been in the region for a short while, but after showcasing a bit of his strength, Ziyu Immortal Fairy began to see him in a different light. If it had been any other peak stage Dechang cultivator, they would never have received such respect from a well-known Xianxia like her. Taoist Wushuang, you flatter me. I'm merely a few years older than you, that's all. With your talent, once you break through and become an immortal, I might need to rely on you instead. Ziyu Immortal Fairy smiled, her almond-shaped eyes narrowing in amusement. She enjoyed this kind of flattery. Seeing her reaction, Jian Wushuang continued to compliment her. With your talents and beauty, Immortal Fairy, I'm sure there are plenty more outstanding cultivators pursuing you. Why would you pay attention to an ordinary cultivator like me? As soon as he said this, two voices echoed in his mind. Shameless! That old hag is at least 50,000 years old, and you're still willing to eat up her flattery. Brother Wushuang, don't listen to that old guy. 50,000 years is nothing. Haven't you heard that being 3,000 years older means they've already entered the ranks of the immortals? Besides, I think Ziyu Immortal Fairy looks pretty good with that figure, those eyes. The first voice was from Immortal Jiuchen, full of disdain, while the second was encouragement from Xiangyang. Immortal Jiuchen didn't know Jian Wushuang's true origins and could only sense from his aura that he was born into this world relatively recently, about 100 years ago, which was indeed very short. Xiangyang, on the other hand, knew Jian Wushuang's background. He was a universe god, and who knew how many epochs he had lived through, maybe even hundreds of cycles. How could he possibly be considered young? But Jian Wushuang ignored both of them. He wasn't flirting with Ziyu Immortal Fairy just for fun. He had already figured out most of Ziyu Immortal Fairy's background. She was a smooth operator, skilled at manipulating people. She might be acting interested in him now, but who knew how many others she had been interested in behind the scenes? She simply saw his potential and wanted to deepen their connection. When he reached the immortal level, she probably expected him to become a valuable ally. Ziyu Immortal Fairy smiled flirtatiously as she swayed her graceful body toward Jian Wushuang. Her tone changed slightly as she said, "If you truly see me as an elder sister, I have a great opportunity that requires a few peak Dechang cultivators." Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang immediately cupped his hands and bowed slightly, saying, "If you don't mind, no, if Elder Sister Ziyu doesn't mind, I am more than willing to regard you as family." At that moment, Jian Wushuang's genuine expression made him seem like an infatuated man. For a brief moment, Ziyu Immortal Fairy truly felt something. She took his strong arm in her hand, her voice soft and charming. "You sweet talker. As long as Elder Sister is willing, I'll eat honey every day," Jian Wushuang teased. Since they were on the sacred mountain, the two couldn't go too far, and soon hurried down to Ziyu Immortal Fairy's residence within the city. It was a sprawling mansion that covered 10 li of land. As soon as Jian Wushuang stepped inside, he immediately sensed several powerful presences. At least 4 Xianxians, along with 2 peak Dechang cultivators. It was clear that Ziyu Immortal Fairy had brought him here for serious business. In the tea hall, 6 powerful figures sat on 2 sides. On one side were the 4 Xianxians, and on the other side were 2 peak Dechang cultivators. Jian Wushuang noticed that when the cultivators saw the unfamiliar nascent soul stage cultivator arriving with Ziyu Immortal, they all furrowed their brows. However, none of them questioned it on the spot. Instead, they all nodded politely in greeting. Ziyu Immortal held Jian Wushuang's arm and began introducing the people present. The first person she introduced had a young appearance, a burly and muscular physique, and a pair of cold eyes. He had an unapproachable aura, and his neatly combed hair added to his solemn demeanor. Wu Shuang. This is Wu Ho Jinxian of the Liang sect. He's already one of the fifth-step powerhouses among the Immortals, incredibly strong, and he also serves as an elder of the Liang sect. Not just any elder, but one who holds real authority. After finishing her introduction, Ziyu Immortal winked at Wu Ho Jinxian. He dodged her gaze slightly but did not seem to resist. Jian Wushuang quickly stepped forward, bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Wu Ho Jinxian." Wu Ho Jinxian, in consideration of Ziyu Immortal, nodded silently and let out a single hum of acknowledgement, which was enough to consider the introduction complete. To Jian Wushuang, this type of person wasn't frightening. At the very least, he wasn't the treacherous kind. After all, people often said that those who wore their emotions on their faces were the simplest to deal with. Being able to judge a person's character based on their appearance meant the threat they posed was minimal. The most dangerous were always those whose emotions were inscrutable. From the first glance, Jian Wushuang developed a good impression of Wu Ho Jinxian. Ziyu Immortal then proceeded to introduce the other three Immortals, as well as the two nascent soul stage cultivators. Initially, Jian Wushuang had assumed that Ziyu Immortal was the leader of the group. However, when she introduced one of the nascent soul cultivators, Jian Wushuang realized that the true leader of these people was likely the nascent soul cultivator standing before him. True Lord Shuiyang. This man was at the peak of the nascent soul stage, with a life force 5,000 times stronger than average and battle strength that was incredibly fierce. In the realm of immortality, there were roughly 9 steps of power. Each step was a major leap in cultivation. The 9th step represented the peak of immortality. Beyond that, one could condense their origin source to become a Tao Lord. Among the people present, the strongest in terms of raw power were Wu Ho Jinxian and another immortal named Tian Ken Jinxian. Both of them were 5th-step powerhouses. Within the realm of immortality, they were considered mid-tier in strength. Those stronger than them had likely already founded their own sects and were regarded as top figures in ancient domains. Wu Ho Jinxian was not very talkative and had a cold demeanor, which meant he lacked the diplomacy required to lead. Hence, Jian Wushuang initially believed that the elderly Tian Ken Jinxian was the leader of these people. When Ziyu Immortal introduced him, Jian Wushuang had shown even more respect. But it was only when she introduced True Lord Shuiyang that Jian Wushuang realized the truth. Ziyu Immortal mentioned the 2 supreme experts within the city, and Jian Wushuang suddenly understood. However, True Lord Shuiyang was sensitive about his background. The moment Ziyu Immortal deliberately mentioned his connections, he immediately interrupted her, saying, "Background is just background. It has nothing to do with my strength. There's no need for anyone to mind that." His words brought smiles to everyone's faces. It was both a gesture of humility and a way to gain some respect from the others. Jian Wushuang also acknowledged the fact that True Lord Shuiyang had considerable influence. Anyone with connections to the sun symbol within the heavenly altar held a prestigious status. Within the Fuhai ancient domain, there were 2 supreme experts. One of them was the holy disciple of the sacred sect, known as the Two-Faced Buddha. This person had a strange personality, often doing things that sent chills down people's spines. His strength was immense, and though the faction he had founded had no official name and seemed disorganized, every one of his subordinates was just as cruel and erratic as he was. Merely hearing his name within the city would make anyone shudder. The other supreme expert was much more normal by comparison. Not only was he normal, but he was also a righteous cultivator, widely respected. His reputation extended not only across the Fuhai domain but also throughout the entire 72 domains. Though this was the sacred sect's territory, even the ancient court praised this righteous expert. There were even rumors that if this expert ever decided to visit the ancient court, he could easily be granted the title of Heavenly King. It was known that the ancient court had a total of 4 great kings. Although none of them held the title of emperor, each was a supreme powerhouse among the Tao Lords. Not only did their strength have to be formidable, but they also had to possess a heart for the righteous path. Both qualities were essential. Yang Ding Tian, the inheritor of the Yang talisman from the sacred land, that was why his nickname was the Yang Talisman Bearer. This was because, in the entire ancient domain, very few had managed to obtain the inheritance of the Yang Talisman. Even many powerful cultivators who had perfected the sequence of inheritances had not obtained the Yang Talisman. It was evident how difficult it was to obtain the Yang Talisman. In fact, this wasn't the first time he had heard of the Yang Talisman. He had seen it in the Divine Eye Order. The Yang Talisman was considered a type of key, though no one knew what it was meant to unlock, so it was regarded as merely a symbol of strength. True Lord Shuiyang, whose real name was Yang Zhonghuan, was the younger brother of Yang Dingtian. Despite his older brother's immense reputation, True Lord Shuiyang's strength during his Mahayana stage was no less impressive. He was a being capable of contending with Immortal Xianxia, yet he was much more reserved in nature. He never took advantage of his brother's fame to act recklessly. This was what made many respect him. However, there were also those who grew jealous because of it. One of the other Mahayana cultivators was particularly displeased. He was a disciple of the crippled elder. Although he appeared amicable and eloquent, the sinister intent in his eyes could not be hidden. After briefly greeting everyone, Immortal Xiu arranged for him to sit next to the crippled elder's disciple and then moved on to the main topic. Immortal Xiu smiled warmly and said, "True Lord Shuiyang, this matter begins with you. I will vouch for you. Everyone here can be considered one of our own. You can now speak in detail about that issue." Everyone knew this, so they all turned their attention to True Lord Shuiyang. They were curious as to why, as the younger brother of Yang Dingtian, he needed external help for his adventures. Why not just rely on his brother's formidable subordinates, of which there were many, and to go through Immortal Xiu for this? It seemed entirely unnecessary. Although Immortal Xiu was quite famous within the city of Tiantan, the number of supreme powerhouses she truly knew was limited. Most only showed her respect for her reputation. Among the 4 true immortals present, only 2 were at the 5th step of immortality, while the other 2 were at the 4th step, and their life levels and immortal power were relatively ordinary. If it was said that True Lord Shuiyang didn't want to rely on his older brother, that seemed a bit far-fetched. His brother was strong, but he certainly wasn't a fool. Now, everyone looked at True Lord Shuiyang, eager to hear his reasoning. True Lord Shuiyang noticed their curiosity and began to explain. "The reason I troubled Immortal Xiu this time is because I didn't want my brother to know about this matter. Also, the place I discovered is rather peculiar. It requires Mahayana stage cultivators as well as true Immortal Xianxia. While it doesn't pose a great threat to me, it would be quite troublesome to handle alone, so I called upon all of you to assist me. However, this matter must remain confidential, especially from my brother. He must not find out. Rest assured, True Lord Shuiyang." The crippled elder smiled and agreed. "Now that we're all on the same boat, we'll prioritize our shared interests above all else." The others also nodded in agreement. Next, True Lord Shuiyang began to explain the details. It was actually quite simple. He had discovered the palace of an ancient demon from the archaic era. This ancient demon had already reached the level of immortality, and his power back then was formidable. Everyone was familiar with his name. It was the same as the name of the ancient region he ruled. The sea-covering demon god. He was an ancient demon who became immortal during the archaic era. Among the 108 ancient demons of that time, only 72 had become immortal demons, while the remaining 36 were at the peak of the Great Ascension stage. As a result, 36 ancient regions were completely destroyed. Only 72 ancient regions remained. The sea-covering demon god was one of those 72. The palace he had once built must still contain many treasures. Ancient demons were known for their greed, and they loved consuming treasures born from the heavens and earth, each one incomparably precious. During the archaic era, the ancient regions were filled with treasures, most of which had been collected by the ancient demons. They consumed some but left others behind. Now, tens of thousands of years had passed, and there must still be undiscovered palaces or ancient lands remaining. Everyone was extremely excited after hearing this. An ancient demon's palace. It was an ancient demon's palace. Even if there were only a few treasures left untouched by the demons, they would be more than enough for them to use. After all, treasures born from the heavens and earth during the archaic era were now priceless. Excitement, however, quickly gave way to hesitation. Xianxia Wuho spoke bluntly, "Shuiyang, don't take this the wrong way, but since you've discovered an ancient demon's palace, why not tell your elder brother and let him open it? Wouldn't all the treasures end up being yours? Don't tell me you don't want to rely on your brother." Matters related to an ancient demon's palace aren't just about pride. Although his words were straightforward, they hit the nail on the head. That's very direct. True Lord Shuiyang wasn't offended. He responded immediately, "Because this ancient demon's palace is inside the dual-faced god's domain." As soon as he said this, everyone froze. Even Ziyu Fairy's expression darkened, and she snapped angrily, "Shuiyang, you didn't mention this earlier. Are you trying to ruin my reputation? An ancient demon's palace, with such a huge opportunity, and you say I'm ruining your reputation? If you're too scared, just forget I mentioned it. We can disband right now." True Lord Shuiyang's tone was firm. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the brother of Yang Dingtian. Old man Tian Can was the first to snap out of it, quickly stepping in to mediate. "Ziyu, don't be too angry. This is indeed a huge matter, and I believe Brother Shuiyang didn't mean any harm. As the saying goes, fortune favors the bold. Once an ancient demon's palace is discovered, the treasures inside will be worth a fortune. With such a huge opportunity, Brother Shuiyang is willing to take the risk and bring us along, which means the risk must be considerable. If there were no risks, why would he seek our help?" Although his explanation was weak, everyone couldn't help but feel tempted. Of course, they were merely tempted. No one dared to speak up. After all, this was the dual-faced god's domain. It was the territory of the dual-faced Buddha. Forget about them, even Tao lords wouldn't dare cause trouble there. Jian Wushuang had heard of the dual-faced Buddha before, and knew of his ruthlessness and explosive temper. However, he hadn't expected it to unnerve everyone present to this extent. Ziyu Fairy immediately sent him a message, "Wushuang, I don't think you should get involved in this mess. I'll arrange for you to enter a secluded courtyard in my residence. If they do decide to venture into the dual-faced god's domain, you'll stay there temporarily. Once everything is over, you'll be free to leave. I hope you understand." Jian Wushuang understood. She wasn't trying to imprison him. It was just that the situation was too serious. If he didn't go along, they might even kill him to ensure his silence. Allowing him to stay at her residence was already quite courteous. Jian Wushuang naturally didn't get angry, nor did he blame the other party, because he hadn't planned on refusing. The reason he got close to Ziyu was to find an opportunity through her to explore the ancient domain. Finding his own path required both risk and luck. Although this place might not be of much help to him, it was still better than nothing. Moreover, he discovered that his body needed to constantly devour treasures, or it would gradually weaken. This was one of the major drawbacks of the realm beast physique. It required continuous absorption of energy, and this massive expenditure was something he couldn't currently afford without treasures. In the future, when he became an immortal, the consumption of divine power would also need to be replenished with treasures. That's why he came here with her. Originally, he thought it would be a minor opportunity or adventure, but to his surprise, luck was on his side. True Lord Shuiyang had discovered the ancient demon palace. A chance so immense that even Tao lords would be tempted. Encountering such a great opportunity was something he, a nascent soul stage cultivator, had to treasure. However, as a nascent soul cultivator, it wasn't appropriate for him to speak out in front of everyone. So he remained silent, though his expression showed his astonishment. This prompted Ziyu Fairy to send him a concerned voice transmission. Though he wanted to go, he didn't want to seem overly eager, so he replied cautiously, "Fairy Ziyu, what do you think about this? If you go, I will go too." Jian Wushuang spoke with a serious and solemn tone this time. Earlier, in Ziyu's eyes, he had always appeared carefree and unruly, but now, with this demeanor, his words warmed her heart. Still, she continued to advise him, "I can tell your strength isn't weak, and you must have encountered great opportunities yourself. I understand that you're stuck at the threshold of immortality, but there's no need to take unnecessary risks. You've cultivated for a short time, so you might not know what kind of place the dual-faced God Palace is. It's a living hell. Even if we aren't discovered by the strong cultivators of the dual-faced God Palace, reaching the ancient demon palace that true Lord Shuiyang mentioned is incredibly dangerous. If we're caught, no one will be able to save us. You're still young. There's no need to push yourself so hard. Why not stay at my residence for now? After this, I can introduce you to a super existence among the immortals, and I'm sure you'll become an immortal Xianxia in no time. Her words were spoken with sincerity and responsibility, and Jian Wushuang was moved. If he were an ordinary person, this would be an incredibly tempting offer. To be introduced to a 7th or even 8th-step immortal Xianxia. Many nascent soul cultivators would dream of such an opportunity but never have the means to attain it. Yet Ziyu, whom he had only known for a short time, was willing to make that connection for him. She was undoubtedly a benefactor in his life. But he was Jian Wushuang. He wasn't an ordinary person. Fairy, there's no need to persuade me further. I understand the gravity of this situation. If true Lord Shuiyang dares to go, I'm not much weaker than him, so I can naturally go as well. If I want to become a super strong cultivator, I can't afford to be timid. Jian Wushuang's tone was firm. These were words from his heart. To become a super strong cultivator, one couldn't fear danger. Even if the road ahead had a 99% chance of leading to death, one still had to walk it. If one succeeded, they would naturally surpass 99% of their peers. Danger and reward were proportional. His exchange with Ziyu Fairy reflected the feelings of everyone present. At present, only true Lord Wu Ho expressed his willingness to go. The others hesitated. Old man Tian Can was speaking with a lot of flowery words, but his meaning was clear. He was probing the risks involved and questioning the details of the ancient demon palace. Just because true Lord Shuiyang said it existed didn't mean it truly did. After all, it was the domain of the two-faced God Palace, ruled by the two-faced Buddha. If the ancient demon palace really existed, how could it be true Lord Shuiyang who discovered it? How did he discover it? Anyway, if this were an ordinary place, no one would ask, because everyone had secrets. But this time it was different, concerned their very lives. Once discovered, they would undoubtedly perish. At that time, no one would be able to save them. The two-faced Buddha was a superpower on par with true Lord Shuiyang's elder brother. And the key issue was that this man was notoriously fickle, showing no regard for anyone. Even true Lord Shuiyang would not escape if things went wrong. Young friend Shuiyang, I think we need to deliberate more on this matter. It's too risky. Without substantial reward, I believe entering would be nothing short of courting death. Old man Tian Can continued to debate the benefits. If there were valuable treasures within, he would naturally be willing to take the risk. For example, if there were an opportunity that could allow him to make 5 strides forward on the origin source path and become a Tao Lord, that would indeed be worth the risk. Jian Wushuang was also waiting for his response. The treasures on him weren't many, and now he had to think about the future. Having just entered the ancient territory, he indeed needed to take some risks to gather treasures for security. Though he had obtained many treasures in the Crimson Eye realm, few were of immediate use. Most of true Lord Yi Hua's treasures had been given to Xiangyang and the others. As for the life seeds, he had consumed only a few, while most had been given to Zhang An'ai. Zhang An'ai was the daughter of Zhang Shang, which was an undeniable fact. Moreover, this Zhang Shang was the Zhang Shang of the heavenly maiden timespace. Although their memories were shared, their cultivation abilities were different. The Zhang Shang of the heavenly maiden had also walked the path of life. This path of life also stemmed from the divine willow tree. Therefore, Zhang An'ai, influenced by her mother on a life level, had gained the most from absorbing the life seeds. Naturally, the majority of the life seeds were given to her. Zhou Chun and Xiangyang were quite ordinary. Here, ordinary referred to their talents. Fortunately, after Xiangyang entered the nascent soul stage, he recovered the original inheritance from his soul's consciousness. Now, following his previous path, things were progressing smoothly. He came from a prestigious family, and during his time in the mortal realm, he had access to the finest resources. However, now he seemed to have regressed, not even as strong as he had been during his mortal years. As for Zhou Chen, he was even worse off. Originally a spirit body, though he now had a physical body, he lacked cultivation experience and relied entirely on Jian Wushuang's support. This old fellow, if Jian Wushuang didn't get him some benefits, even he wouldn't be able to stand it. It must be known that Zhou Chen had traveled to 9 great worlds. These worlds weren't mortal realms but otherworldly dimensions. The final world was in the heavenly fire domain of the ancient territory. The first 8 worlds were all in different dimensions. With Zhou Chen's experience, Jian Wushuang could later venture into these worlds to gather treasures. Now, his physical body could unleash a power surge 1,000-fold, making it incredibly strong. But it still required treasures for maintenance, or else the life level would degrade. That would affect his combat strength. Currently, he relied entirely on his physical combat prowess. Although his ultimate sword Dao had been acknowledged by the origin source, it still fell short compared to the body of a realm beast, as the origin source's amplification would only come into play after achieving immortality. For now, his combat strength was quite weak. However, his extreme Dao remained as formidable as ever, already allowing him to grasp the mysteries of all things and maintain his strength. What he lacked now were physical treasures. As for improving his origin source, he hadn't even found a new path yet, so there was no rush. Extreme Dao, Sword Dao, what will be the next one? Infinity? He had a specific direction in mind, but how to take the next step was something he still didn't know. This was the bottleneck, knowing exactly what one wanted but not knowing how to strive toward it. Some people got stuck at this stage for countless years, fighting desperately for ages without finding the answer. Jian Wushuang's comprehension had surpassed his peak from the past, several times stronger. Perhaps he would succeed soon, but no one could say for sure. While pondering over his own matters, he also listened to the conversations of those around him. Time passed quickly. The group discussed for an entire day and night. In fact, it was just a few seasoned veterans trying to wear down true Lord Shuiyang until they had coaxed every detail out of him. Only then did they make a decision. This was expected. True Lord Shuiyang hadn't wanted to say too much at first, but the chances were the same for everyone going. Once everything was revealed, his advantage would be gone. But if he kept quiet, no one would be willing to go with him. Even his own brother wouldn't agree to him going to the twin-faced god's mansion. That was why he hadn't told Yang Dingtian about it. One was righteous, the other was evil. Yang Dingtian and the twin-faced Buddha had always been at odds. For his own brother to go to the twin-faced god's mansion was, in Yang Dingtian's eyes, akin to seeking death. The ancient demon palace was in the twin-faced god's mansion, and even Yang Dingtian himself couldn't access it. Ordinary people could disguise themselves and possibly sneak into the mansion undetected. But if Yang Dingtian tried, he would surely be discovered. That was the reason why true Lord Shuiyang hadn't sought Yang Dingtian's help. He was proud, but not to the point of being arrogantly self-delusional. If the ancient demon palace wasn't located in the twin-faced god's mansion, he would have chosen to tell his brother, letting Yang Dingtian go there personally. Then, even if they had to split it 50-50 or 70-30, it would still be cooperation, protecting his dignity while helping his brother, earning the latter's approval. But the problem was that the ancient demon palace happened to be inside the twin-faced god's mansion. When he first discovered this, he had been devastated. He had, of course, never been to the twin-faced god's mansion, but he had obtained an ancient demon token, a personal jade pendant of the sea-overturning demon god. It contained a map and the exact location of the ancient demon palace, and with the jade he could enter. However, to enter the ancient demon palace, one needed a bloodline imprint. In other words, the aura had to match. No one could do this, only special life forms could. Yet true Lord Shuiyang had found, through various records, that aside from the main entrance, the ancient demon palace had a special passage. This passage had been used by the ancient demon subordinates for their daily duties and maintenance of the palace. This passage could accommodate 4 Xianxia and 3 cultivators at the Mahayana stage. It did not require a bloodline imprint, nor the ancient demon token, so his token was effectively useless. This meant that he no longer held an advantage, and by the time everyone entered through the special passage, the treasures inside would be won purely by individual ability. Once he had laid everything bare, the crippled elder and fairy Ziyu also agreed one after the other. The other two four-step Xianxia decided to agree as well. After all, the temptation was simply too great. Even if the twin-faced god's mansion was hell itself, they still had to venture into it. Since everyone is in agreement, let's each begin our preparations now. But remember, before we leave, we must announce that we're going into seclusion. For this, we'll need Fairy Ziyu's help. True Lord Xueyang's gaze shifted to the main seat. The Ziyu Immortal Fairy let out a faint smile with her crimson lips, her voice filled with charm as she said, "Rest assured, I will arrange your caves, but when the time comes, you all must send in an avatar. You should do things thoroughly, right?" Naturally, everyone nodded in agreement without objection. Once the date was set, Ziyu Immortal Fairy brought out an oath stone, and everyone stepped forward to swear their blood oaths one by one. The oath was simple. They must not reveal this conversation. Inside the twin-faced divine palace, they must not attack one another. However, after entering the ancient demon palace, the oath would be lifted. This oath was relatively lenient, without much restraint. Once inside the ancient demon palace, everything would depend on one's own abilities. This point disadvantaged True Lord Xueyang the most, but he still accepted it. At the very least, regarding the ancient demon palace, he knew much more than everyone else. For instance, he knew where certain treasures within the ancient demon palace were stored, how to access some hidden chambers, and other similar information. But that was the extent of his advantage. Compared to Tian Can and the others, it wasn't much of an edge. Tian Can had brought along his own disciple and was incredibly strong, so his chances were high. However, among those present, Ziyu Immortal Fairy remained the most secure. Two four-step Xianxia and Jian Wushuang were on her side. Ziyu Immortal Fairy herself was only a four-step Xianxia, but she had a vast array of treasures. Her origin source Tao was powerful, and her divine eye inheritance, obtained from the second sequence, had now been cultivated to the fourth level. She was close to perfecting the fifth level, making her strength comparable to that of Tian Can and Wuho True Immortal. She was the core figure in this operation. Whether it was someone as cunning as Old Man Tian Can or someone as cold-hearted as Wuho True Immortal, they had to tread carefully around this female immortal. The same was true for True Lord Xueyang. Jian Wushuang might have appeared carefree on the surface, but deep down, he wasn't that concerned. However, he remembered Ziyu Immortal Fairy's kindness. Having been in the world for many years, he had encountered plenty of people. Many people's characters and motives could be discerned from a simple conversation. Take Old Man Tian Can, for example. He was dangerous and had no bottom line. The moment danger struck, he'd be the first to run. Then there was Wuho True Immortal. He was rigid and unyielding, which was both his strength and his weakness. Being teamed up with someone like him could easily get one killed, as his actions were not as cunning as Tian Can's. However, in battle, Wuho was somewhat reliable. Finally, there was Ziyu Immortal Fairy, someone who could navigate every situation. Those who didn't like her would consider her opportunistic, clinging to power and wealth without any principles. But those who admired her would see her as loyal and righteous, always genuinely helping those around her. Moreover, being a female immortal garnered her considerable goodwill among her peers. This was why True Lord Xueyang had chosen Ziyu Immortal Fairy to gather the group. He trusted her. Jian Wushuang had encountered many similar figures. In the end, actions spoke louder than motives. It wasn't about what lay in someone's heart but what they did. After the gathering, Ziyu Immortal Fairy did not keep her so-called trusted companions, thus avoiding suspicion from both Tian Can and True Lord Xueyang. This also made her seem open and transparent to her allies. Jian Wushuang chose not to leave and stayed at the residence. He didn't have much to prepare. Being intangible and invisible, he could conceal himself so that no one could find him, unless someone sealed the space and launched a wide-range attack. Moreover, he didn't bother preparing life-saving items. If entering the twin-faced divine palace threatened his life, then his realm beast's physical body would be too worthless. He had never regarded immortals as a real threat. Back in the Great Division, as a Yen immortal, he could thrash even a Grand Yen immortal. He had even slain a Grand Yen immortal. Based on his strength conversion, a 9-revolution Grand Yen immortal was equivalent to a 5-step true immortal. A 9-turn Grand Yen immortal was the same as a 9-step true immortal. Above that would be a Tao Lord. However, when he was in the Grand Division of the Deci domain, his physical body had been quite ordinary. While it was considered perfect in the mundane universe, it was far less powerful in the original universe's Great Sea region. Even back then, with just his ultimate swordsmanship, he had managed to defeat opponents above his level. Now, he possessed not only the ultimate sword Tao but also the extreme Tao. Additionally, he had the body of a realm beast and the willpower of one. His combat strength had improved tremendously since then. Even without the Wuxia sword, he could still easily defeat immortal true immortals who were above his level. Though the extreme Tao had not fully evolved into the starry sky, he could still harness a portion of the power of all things to amplify himself. Moreover, with the body of a realm beast, he could briefly unleash strength up to 10 million times its usual power. The physical strength of his body was that of a 10 million-fold great perfection. Even true immortals would tremble before him. Furthermore, his powerful realm beast consciousness could combine with the eye of the candle dragon to perform devastating mental attacks. He didn't lack trump cards. Rather, he had too many, and many of them remained unused. Naturally, he didn't need external items for survival. What he needed now were external resources to strengthen his foundation. His current foundation was too weak, which made it impossible for him to utilize the microuniverse within the Gray Flask. Even if he entered the Gray Flask and devoured the energy from a microuniverse furiously, he still wouldn't be able to shake the origin source of the microuniverse. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to take any risks. He could have simply sat back and continuously absorbed energy from the Gray Flask without ever exhausting it. 9 Prison Command. With a thought, he summoned this treasure, which was on par with the Gray Flask in value. Even with just a slight comprehension of it, he had already become deeply astonished by the Divine Eye Secret technique. The Divine Eye Secret technique was even more powerful than his eternal transformation. That senior brother's strength definitely surpassed his own. Although his eternal transformation had not yet reached its peak, at his strongest, his true body could barely use the ultimate form of eternal transformation. There was still more potential for him to develop, but by then, his need for greater combat strength had diminished. Across the entire realm god continent, there was no one who posed a threat to him. So, he had stopped improving his combat strength and shifted his focus elsewhere. He parted ways with Huiqing and Wuxia, embarking on his own path of tribulation. Had he continued developing, he might have discovered another path. But that was a matter for another time. The unique aspect of the Divine Eye Secret technique was that not all of its burning power came from oneself. Wei Jiuxian was the perfect example. He could burn through the entire power of the Crimson Eye realm. That was the reason for his immense strength. Of course, the life seed left by Xianxia was the key factor. Yet, this couldn't hide the fact that he was a heaven-defying existence in the mortal realm. When he first heard about the secret art of the Divine Eye, he already felt it was extraordinary. Now, having obtained the 9 prison medallion left behind by his senior brother from the Divine Fire Hall, what he had comprehended from the complete secret art of the Divine Eye far surpassed what he had initially heard. The secret art of the Divine Eye originated before the first fragmentation of the realm god continent. If one were to trace it back, it would even go as far as the starry sky. The legacy that was left behind wasn't only confined to this world. There were traces in the starry sky as well. But he had never heard of it, perhaps because it was not very noticeable in the vast starry sky. Or maybe someone had destroyed it. After all, the secret art of the Divine Eye was far too heaven-defying. It was different from a universe master burning their own universe. A universe master at their peak could burn the entire space-time continuum to enhance their battle strength, leaving the starry sky to recover the lost power. If the starry sky had an owner, they would never allow such a secret art to exist. This was Jian Wushuang's true belief. The complete secret art of the Divine Eye was divided into 9 phases. All the sequence inheritances in the ancient domain world came from practitioners of this secret art. Whether it was the first sequence or the fifth sequence, it was all a matter of the practitioner's strength. For example, once a practitioner of the secret art of the divine I reached the fifth phase, they could leave behind the first sequence's inheritance hall. A practitioner at the first phase could leave behind a fifth sequence inheritance after becoming a monarch. However, to leave behind a first sequence inheritance, one would need the strength of a universe master and to have reached the fifth phase of the secret art. This explained why first sequence inheritances were so rare. On the other hand, stronger inheritance sanctuaries were entirely different. These were left behind by the Divine Eye clan and were far more powerful and complete than sequence inheritances. Any expert of the Divine Eye clan who left behind such a sanctuary must have at least reached the sixth phase of the secret art, likely having the strength of a universe god. A sanctuary left behind by a universe god carried immense value. The ancient domain world was too small for such a sanctuary to appear. It was no wonder that the Sacred Lord could overthrow the rule of the ancient court in such a short time. However, the Sacred Lord had taken a rather extreme path. He wasn't a member of the Divine Eye clan, yet he wanted to walk their path. In Jian Wushuang's eyes, this person was doomed to fail sooner or later. From what he had heard and seen, there was no evidence that anyone from the Divine Eye clan still existed. It was a clear sign that the clan had been wiped out, and that senior brother had also perished. How could such a powerful clan, with such a heaven-defying secret art, have been wiped out? Even in the starry sky, who had the capability to annihilate so many people without leaving a trace? Moreover, it was clear that the secret art of the Divine Eye had been intentionally placed here. The world he had entered was likely a large fragment left behind after the realm god continent had shattered. The entire inheritance of the Divine Eye had been concentrated in this world. And it was no coincidence that Master Xianxia had intentionally brought him here, and his senior brother had handed over the complete secret art of the Divine Eye. What did all this mean? If the secret art of the Divine Eye is forbidden in the starry sky, then by cultivating the complete version of it, wouldn't I? No doubt trouble awaited him once he left. But with the help of the star spirits back then, could that relationship protect him? He pondered deeply on the connection between the starry sky, Master Xianxia, and his senior brother. First, the creator of the starry sky was still alive, and he was, in fact, a realm beast. He was the most accomplished of all realm beasts. Back when the starry sky was created, the power of countless realm beasts had been absorbed into it. The strongest entity in the starry sky was undoubtedly the creator himself. Then came the power that couldn't be fully absorbed, which had overflowed. The 12 star spirits. These individuals maintained the entire starry sky. Since the secret art of the Divine Eye was forbidden, there was no way he could cultivate it. His relationship with Vis wasn't strong enough to allow him to act without consequences. Infinite, formless, realm beast? His brows furrowed as he suddenly thought of something. It was the issue of the limit. The void or the infinite lands had no rules, and one could grow without any boundaries, as long as they had the potential. That meant they still needed to absorb power. The power of the void. These realm beasts were said to have no limits, but even they would reach a peak. There was also one other thing he hadn't given much thought to at the time. The overflow of power from the starry sky had created the 12 star spirits. Logically, if realm beasts had no limits, how could there be an overflow of power from the starry sky? Could it be that the creator of the starry sky had already reached his limit? This contradiction left him perplexed. The secret art of the Divine Eye can burn power that doesn't belong to you. The starry sky has a limit, but realm beasts don't. He muttered to himself, going over these rules, until his thoughts finally drifted to his own situation. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, exclaiming excitedly, "I understand!" His excitement instantly caught the attention of the few people inside the 9-prison pagoda. What do you understand? Did Senior Wushuang grasp the origin source? How long has he been alive? It's already heaven-defying that he managed to reach the peak of the great perfection stage. Is he planning to prove his Tao and ascend to immortality right on the spot? Now that everything became clear to him, Jian Wushuang had no interest in explaining. He immediately closed his eyes, shutting himself off from everything around him. At the same time, he also sealed the 9-prison pagoda, preventing those inside from hearing anything else he had to say. He had spoken out of sheer excitement just moments earlier. Thankfully, he hadn't revealed what he had realized, because at that moment, it became crystal clear to him what teacher Xianyi's true intentions were when he entered this world. The groundwork laid on the Realm God continent had prepared him to enter the Realm King Divine world and absorb the majority of Morosa's power. This was due to his extraordinarily powerful consciousness. But why was it so strong? The Sky Sight Heavenly Chessboard. Back then, he had absorbed all the origin source contained within the Sky Sight Heavenly Chessboard. These origins were rich in soul essence, which strengthened his own soul. With a powerful soul came a powerful consciousness. As a result, within the Realm King Divine world, his combat strength had already surpassed the 9-star universe gods. On top of that, he had absorbed such an immense amount of Morosa power. Shortly after leaving the Realm King Divine world, he had entered this new world. Through the will of the Realm Beast, he had fused with the Realm Beast's body. Finally, he had acquired the secret technique of the Divine Eye Clan. All of these things had been carefully arranged in advance. He should have realized this much earlier. Everything had been preparing him for the cultivation of the Divine Eye secret technique, or perhaps it was all meant to break through his limits. In the starry sky, what did it matter how strong you were? Why was it that only star spirits dared to venture out? Because star spirits, in essence, weren't all that different from realm beasts. Or rather, due to some issue with the starry sky, star spirits couldn't stay away for too long. But he was different. Now, all that was left was for him to obtain an origin source similar to the realm beasts. Once he succeeded, he would be just like the realm beasts, able to survive and even cultivate in the void. This had all been guided by teacher Xianyi. From that memory fragment, it was clear to him that the place where the battles were fought wasn't in the starry sky but in the void. I should have realized this sooner, he sighed internally. Indeed, thinking about it now, it felt somewhat like an afterthought. But it wasn't too late. He hadn't given up on the Divine Eye secret technique, and he still had to cultivate it. However, whether or not he could use it in the starry sky, he had to be cautious. After all, the Divine Eye clan had perished. Senior Brother Ghost I might still be alive, but the likelihood was that he wasn't in the starry sky. It was more probable he was in the void. Back then, being able to participate in that battle indicated that they were on a path similar to his current one, the path of disorder. Void and disorder. If the large-scale burning of the Divine Eye secret technique is used in the land of disorder, I can't even begin to imagine the consequences. During that battle, I didn't see anyone else using the Divine Eye technique. Now that I've started cultivating it, perhaps it's a method that could change the future. He hadn't thought about it much before, which led to his delayed realization. This time he dared to think boldly. Perhaps in this lifetime, he had been reborn, and his return was meant to cultivate the powerful Divine Eye secret technique. The others might also cultivate it. By then, their strength would increase significantly. But that wasn't enough. He couldn't rely solely on the Divine Eye technique. After all, it was a technique created by someone else. He needed to create his own pinnacle secret technique. It all depended on how far the eternal transformation could take him. If the path of divine power couldn't be traveled for long, he would switch to another. He couldn't forget that memory of how he had fallen. Failure wasn't an option. With that thought, he seized every moment and began delving into the Divine Eye secret technique. The first rotation corresponded to the first level of the 9-prison pagoda. At present, he had only mastered the third layer of the first rotation. This was roughly equivalent to half of the fifth sequence. However, this was the complete secret technique of the Divine Eye clan. The inheritance of the fifth sequence could help a cultivator achieve the effect of the first eye, but there were varying degrees of strength. His one rotation was worth 100 of others. While comprehending the Divine Eye secret technique, he also probed the 9-prison pagoda. As of now, he hadn't fully grasped the pagoda's specific function. It has the word prison in its name. Could there be some terrifying beings imprisoned within this tower? He pondered for a moment. It was a possibility, but since there was nothing on the first level and no threats, it didn't matter. When he opened the second level, even if there were terrifying entities imprisoned, he could just kill them. If he could open the second level, he would be capable of killing whatever was inside. For a whole month, he focused entirely on cultivating the divine secret technique. During this time, he didn't pay much attention to the matters of the origin source, as they wouldn't be useful in the short term. He concentrated on the divine secret technique, and his first eye had reached the perfect stage. He wasn't sure if his speed was considered fast or slow. He also found himself jumping between comprehending the third, fifth, and even the ninth rotations. Although he could understand them, they weren't useful at his current realm. This explained why some could directly comprehend the first sequence, which corresponded to the fifth rotation. Those inheritors, after all, had only grasped a small part. If he had started learning the divine secret technique in the Inheritance Holy Land, he would have avoided many detours. The Holy Master who had drawn the Inheritance Holy Land to him had merged two sequences, meaning he had cultivated 2 of the first 5 rotations. These 2 rotations were likely very close to each other. This created a massive resonance, drawing an Inheritance Holy Land. The descent of the Holy Land signified that within this part of the world, there was a high possibility someone would cultivate to the 6th rotation. Although the divine secret technique could be cultivated in jumps, the first 5 rotations were simple and not particularly difficult. In fact, there wasn't much of a threshold. But merging them all was extremely challenging, much harder than becoming a universe god. Thus, in the ancient domain, the strongest local experts at most merged 2 sequences, meaning they had cultivated 2 of the first 5 rotations. If one could merge 3 rotations, they could then proceed to cultivate the 6th. In this way, out of the 9 rotations, 4 would have been mastered. There would be hope to open a holy land and become a universe god. Moreover, their strength would be exceedingly formidable. If one wished to cultivate to the 7th rotation, they would need to master 4 of the first 5 rotations. To reach the 8th, perfect mastery of the first 7 rotations was required. This difficulty surpassed becoming a universe god by a wide margin. There was also a key factor, the bloodline of the Divine Eye clan. Only by altering one's bloodline could one cultivate to the 8th rotation. Jian Wushuang, however, didn't face this requirement. He had the formless and invisible body of a realm beast, allowing him to transform into any race at will. Naturally, he didn't need to worry about his bloodline. As for the 9th rotation, he wasn't sure of the difficulty because not even the Divine Eye clan's cultivators could achieve it. This was because Senior Brother Ghost I had left no inheritance for the 9th rotation. That token was something Ghost I had specifically left for him. Perhaps he had also left it for others, those chosen by Teacher Xianxia. After all, with Ghost Eye around, there were bound to be other senior brothers, senior sisters, junior brothers, and junior sisters, and perhaps even a teacher's wife. On the sacred mountain in his memory, there were many powerful auras. He guarded the base of the mountain. Although he had slain many strong intruders, his own strength might not have been the greatest, or perhaps, among Xianxia's many disciples, he was not that noticeable. This won't do. Deep down, he had always believed he was Xianxia's only disciple, and thus naturally the strongest. Now, however, he realized that Xianxia had more than just one disciple, and that he wasn't even the strongest among his peers. A hint of jealousy arose in his heart. This old man. He secretly took on more disciples behind my back, and it seems like there's quite a few of them too. No way, I must become the most outstanding one among them. He swore silently to himself. At the same time, he began to wonder about the identity of the prophet. Could the prophet also be one of his master's disciples? In his memories, the prophet's combat power wasn't particularly overwhelming, yet the prophet gave off the most mysterious vibe. Perhaps they weren't in a master-disciple relationship. At first, the prophet somewhat resembled Xianxia as both shared a similarly mysterious aura, but later in his memory, he realized that the prophet had also been blocking those top-tier experts at the foot of the mountain, confirming they were not the same person. But their auras were strikingly similar. Perhaps they were brothers or fellow disciples. Of course, it was also possible that the prophet was Xianyi's illegitimate child. While his mind raced with wild guesses, a voice suddenly came from inside the 9-prison pagoda, sounding anxious. Jian Wushuang, are you trying to murder us? I can't feel my breath anymore. Senior Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was startled by these words and quickly opened the 9-prison pagoda, rushing in at once. It was only then that he noticed the first layer of the 9-prison pagoda had completely transformed. What used to be a pale, barren world now featured mountains and rivers, resembling a black and white landscape painting. However, the aura had also changed. Originally, the flow of time inside the pagoda had been the same as the outside world, as Jian Wushuang hadn't yet figured out how to manipulate time. The energy within had also matched the external world, since he could infuse divine power into the pagoda. Thus, people like Xianxia could cultivate inside. But now, the energy within had rapidly depleted. It was no longer a paradise for cultivation, but more like a prison. After all, the 9-prison pagoda was originally a prison, so this wasn't entirely surprising. He glanced at the 3 people inside. While they were unharmed, they could no longer train here. I've only just gained control of this place and am not quite familiar with it yet. Did I scare you, little Jiang and I? Jian Wushuang said kindly, his demeanor that of an elder. Jiang and I felt a bit embarrassed, her cheeks flushing slightly, as she softly replied, No, it's just that the sudden change took me by surprise. I didn't expect Senior to have such extraordinary abilities. Just a small trick, Jian Wushuang said, his hands behind his back, pretending not to care. Xiangyang and Immortal Jiuchun didn't refute him, instead asking about the purpose of the 9-prison pagoda. Couldn't be that the pagoda was just for admiring the scenery. Could it? Jian Wushuang then realized he hadn't yet fully activated the pagoda. With a thought, he entered the core of the 9-prison pagoda, where an ancient aura immediately surged toward him. In his mind, a giant eye appeared. The eye was filled with countless colors, and what surprised him most was that it had 10 pupils. In the central pupil, it seemed as if there was an entire starry sky. Surrounding it were 9 smaller pupils, giving off an incredibly mysterious vibe. But that wasn't the most astonishing part. The key was that from the eye, he felt a trace of the star spirit's power. He didn't even think twice before his consciousness manifested in the mental world, where he respectfully bowed and said, Junior Jian Wushuang greets the star spirit. Little one, your reaction is quick. The voice from the enormous eye had no form or color, yet it resonated in his mind. It carried an aura of invincibility across the starry sky. Jian Wushuang lowered his head, not daring to look up, but he could tell that the other party bore no ill intent. He cautiously asked, Star Spirit, may I ask if you've come for the 9-prison pagoda? He had encountered the Star Spirit before. Back then, Weiss had stayed in his origin source universe for a while. Otherwise, the first time he saw such an existence, his consciousness would likely have struggled to adapt. After all, the being was on a much higher level than him. Fortunately, he now had a realm beast body and the will of a realm beast. With his newfound understanding of the origin source of the realm beast, he would one day be of the same lineage as the Star Spirit. When that time came, this sense of distance would disappear. Even now, however, meeting the Star Spirit gave him the feeling of being in a completely different world. Do you know who crafted this 9-prison pagoda back in the day? Jian Wushuang froze for a moment before replying without hesitation. It was Senior Brother Ghost Eye. In the presence of the Star Spirit, there was no room for deception. This was the stark difference between being on different levels. Correct, but not entirely, the massive eye pondered before saying. Indeed, your senior brother forged the 9-prison pagoda to seal all the gods, but later he softened his stance. To suppress the God Eye clan? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Senior brother Ghost Eye was himself a powerful figure of the God Eye clan. How could he suppress his own people? 1,000 questions swirled in Jian Wushuang's mind, but he didn't dare ask them directly. It was as though the enormous eye could see through his thoughts. You may wonder why Ghost Eye would suppress his own clan. The truth is, deep down, you already know the answer. The power of the starry sky is finite. In time, even a universe god would have to leave once reaching the ninth tribulation. The realm god continent is no different. Once someone becomes a time and space lord, they too must leave and enter the starry sky. The starry sky follows the same principle. It doesn't reject star gods but rejects those who burn the starry sky. But do you know why these worlds have become so fragile? The star spirit asked pointedly. Jian Wushuang was momentarily at a loss for words, so he ventured a guess. Could it be because they've been burned? Yes, exactly. They were burned, but it happened a long time ago. Back then, the realm god continent had not yet been shattered. Your senior brother once fought a time and space god on the realm god continent, and he burned the realm god continent along with the 4 major time and space regions. Eventually, this drew the attention of the realm gods, leading to a sneak attack. At that time, the realm god continent was fragile, easily shattered by the realm beasts, which then invaded the starry sky. As the star spirit spoke, its enormous eye flickered with a hint of sorrow and regret. Jian Wushuang felt the same, realizing just how powerful his senior brother must have been back then, burning both the realm god continent and the 4 major time and space regions. It was likely that during that era, the realm god continent was still able to house time and space gods, marking its peak. But the energy had been consumed, and the power that Ghost Eye Senior had used would never return to the starry sky. As a result, the realm god continent and the 4 major time and space regions were left weakened, never to recover. It was then that the realm beasts attacked. Since the realm god continent had been burned, the time and space gods couldn't remain, and they all moved to the starry sky, leaving the realm god continent defenseless. Even its protective forces had been consumed, and the realm beasts shattered both the realm god continent and the 4 major time and space regions in one fell swoop.